Chapter 421. 5,000 versus 20,000. Ivana looked at his face and hesitated. There were so many things she wanted to tell him, but the words were stuck in her mouth. Seeing that she was silent, Alaric lowered his head. Of course, how could she forgive me just like that? Suddenly, he noticed the bracelet on his wrist. It was then that he realized what had happened. I see, so it was she who saved me. His lips curved upwards. He stared at her and was about to say something when, boom, there was a loud explosion that erupted in the distance. Alaric rose to his feet and turned his head toward the direction of the commotion. The battle isn't over yet. I need to help Dad. Thinking about this, he looked at Ivana and said, Ivana, thank you for saving me. Let's talk after this war is over. While saying those words, he took off the bracelet and returned it to her. This bracelet? Ivana already knew that it was a relic, but she had no idea that it was engraved with a superior healing ability, one that surpassed the healing powers of anyone in the Elven Kingdom. For him to give her something so precious without hesitation, she was moved. I know you have a lot of questions. I will answer them once everything is over. I promise you. Alaric replied with a serious look. Fine. Ivana looked away from him and wiped off the tears on her face. Alaric sighed and was about to leave when Ivana's voice drifted into his ears. Be careful out there. Hearing this, Alaric smiled. I will. After saying that, he rushed in the direction of the explosion. Ivana stared at his figure with a complex expression. Will things be the same as they were before? She mumbled. Your Highness, we need to leave now. There are monsters heading this way. An urgent voice pulled her from her thoughts. Startled, Ivana frowned while nodding her head. Gather the nearby warriors. We must regroup with the others. I obey your commands. Meanwhile, the battle against the two catastrophe-grade beasts was still raging. Vulcan's and Garandel's troops arrived to help Lucas and Zephyr, which greatly eased the burden for them. However, the ordinary warriors were like helpless lambs against the two monsters. Even with superior numbers, they couldn't defend themselves and were ruthlessly killed. In just a quarter of an hour, thousands of warriors died, drenching the grasslands with blood. It was a gruesome sight. How can we kill those monsters? Lucas was out of options. With Zephyr seriously wounded, it could barely defend itself against the beasts, so it was Lucas who did most of the fighting. As for the others, they were nothing more than cannon fodder. Even transcendents like Vulcan and Garandel were like bugs in front of the two monsters. While he was immersed in his thoughts, the half-kobold monster suddenly emitted a strange sound that echoed in all directions. What is going on? What is it trying to do? Vulcan furrowed his eyebrows. Garandel, who was standing not far from him, seemed to have realized something and exclaimed with a dark expression. It's calling more minions. What? Everyone was alarmed. They were already having a hard time fighting against the two catastrophe-grade beasts. If more monsters were to join the battle, it would significantly increase the pressure on them. Lucas, what should we do now? Vulcan turned his head to Lucas. All the warriors stared at Lucas, waiting for his decision. Lucas could sense the urgency of the situation, so he racked his brains to think of a countermeasure. If we divide our forces now, the two catastrophe-grade beasts would be more difficult to control, but if we don't do something about their minions, things will also become more dangerous. My lord, give me 5,000 warriors. I will handle those monsters. A voice suddenly drifted over. Lucas was taken aback. He looked at the person who had spoken and fell into deep thought. It was Butch. Among the transcendent knights that Alaric had brought with him to the western region, Butch was the only one who had returned to the north. Alaric sent him back to the north to escort the craftsmen and artisans he got from Birming Island. This guy had only recently advanced to the transcendent knight realm. Can he really handle so many beasts on his own? Lucas hesitated, but when he saw how calm Butch was, he eventually agreed. All right, I will leave this task to you. Butch saluted. I will do my best, my lord. Lucas waved his hand and dismissed him. He could already hear the distant sounds of the monsters screaming and roaring. Butch didn't linger and quickly left with 5,000 warriors. Will they be fine? They will have to fight against tens of thousands of monsters. Vulcan stared at Lucas with a deep look. The latter took a deep breath and replied, I trust him. Since he is confident, I'm sure it will be fine. That was what he said, but Lucas was also unsure. However, there was nothing he could do. They needed more men here to fight with the catastrophe-grade beasts. Vulcan no longer said anything after hearing his words. At this moment, the winged goblin monarch suddenly made a move. Targeted a group of shield-bearers, catching everyone unprepared. Bang! In the blink of an eye, hundreds of warriors perished. It was a brutal, one-sided massacre. No one could block its claws. Follow me. It's been fighting for some time. It will tire out soon. Lucas shouted as he jumped onto an ownerless horse. Right after saying those words, he squeezed his legs, urging the horse to rush forward. Charge! Follow the commander! Hiya! Vulcan and the others who still had their horses quickly followed him. Meanwhile, Garandel led the infantrymen to stick close to them. We can't be left behind. Move your feet. Charge! Charge! Narrowing his eyes, Butch stared at the approaching monster army. From his estimates, they numbered more than 20,000, which was over 4 times his troops. Most of them are goblin warriors and orc warriors. There are some ogres, but there are only a few hundred of them. Butch quickly analyzed the strength of the monster army. Compared to these ferocious beasts, his troops were already exhausted and injured. Conventional formations wouldn't work here. We need a proper battle plan. He frowned. Sir Butch, what is your command? Asked Dahan, one of the few transcendent knights and high elves of the Greenwood Kingdom. He was temporarily assigned as Butch's deputy commander. Butch raised his hand and shouted, My comrades, arrow formation. The arrow formation was one of the simplest battle formations that was taught to the warriors of House Silversword. Just as its name suggested, the soldiers would form an arrow with the most powerful warriors in front. The outer layer would be made up of knights and knight apprentices, while the ordinary warriors would be positioned at the center. This formation was overly reliant on the core force, which was the warriors' position to form the arrowhead. Luckily, we did some training with the barbarian warriors and the elves so everyone can perform this simple formation. Butch was relieved to see his troops properly moving into their positions. Roar! The ferocious roars of the monsters echoed. Butch took a deep breath and bellowed, Charge! As his words fell, he led his troops to charge towards the approaching monster army. Everyone was afraid, but their commander's fearlessness fueled their confidence. The ground trembled vigorously as both sides charged towards each other. In the next moment, the two sides clashed violently. Ah! Roar! With Butch at the frontmost position in the formation, they pierced through the monster army's defense. No monster could block the savage Butch. Even the disaster-grade ogre warriors weren't able to stop him. He was a force to be reckoned with. His valiance in battle increased his troops' morale. Everyone fought relentlessly, ignoring the injuries in their bodies. I'm here. As long as you can hear my voice, we will stand victorious. Unleash your fury. Kill them all. He roared at the top of his lungs. His voice was so loud that it had overpowered the roars of the monsters. The warriors became more courageous upon hearing his words. It was as if everyone was injected with an elixir that boosted their strength. Amazing. So this is the strength of a transcendent knight of House Silversword. I thought he was just as strong as I am. Dahan's eyes flashed with admiration as he watched Butch's figure. With every strike of his weapon, dozens of monsters were killed. He was an unparalleled force that served as a beacon of hope and strength for his troops. I need to keep him safe. Without him, holding back these monsters would be impossible. He thought to himself as he tried his best to stick close to Butch. For our kingdom. For our people. Chapter 422. Caught by surprise. With Butch's troops holding back the monster army, Lucas and the others were able to focus on the catastrophe-grade beasts. Lucas looks completely worn out. This isn't good. Vulcan frowned as he looked at the exhausted Lucas. He thought that Lucas was already invincible after he had become a mythical knight, But even a powerful warrior like him was helpless in front of these monsters. The winged goblin monarch isn't the problem here. Lucas can block it on his own. The real threat is that thing. He looked at the half-kobold monster that was continuously releasing spirit attacks against their troops. Boom! Boom! We need to stop it somehow so Lucas can focus on the winged goblin monarch. As he thought of this, he raised his hand and shouted, "My brothers, follow me to attack that big-headed beast." Upon saying those words, he urged his horse to charge towards the half-kobold beast. Thousands of warriors unhesitatingly followed him, their roars shaking the forest. Lucas, who was fighting the winged goblin monarch, immediately understood what he was trying to do. That fool. Is he trying to get himself killed? He wanted to say something, but the winged goblin monarch didn't give him the chance. It attacked him with fearsome force. Each of its strikes was fatal, so he had to be careful not to get hit. Whoosh! Whoosh! Lucas imbued mana into his sword to deflect and block the monster's long, sharp claws. Clang! Clang! His arm was already covered in cuts, and the injuries were starting to affect his strength and speed. Sensing his weakening power, Lucas snorted and unleashed a massive burst of mana to temporarily increase his strength. "Your efforts are commendable, but you are not my match. Just give up, human. I promise to give you a quick death." The winged goblin monarch spoke with a demonic smile. Lucas was repulsed by its expression. He sneered and simply ignored its remarks. It never spoke like this earlier. He narrowed his eyes and observed the monster closely. It was then that he found out that its arms were shaking almost imperceptibly. "I see. It's also tired." He grinned at the discovery. Knowing that the monster was also exhausted, Lucas fought with less intensity. "Once it shows a flaw, I will attack with full force." The monster didn't seem to notice his plan and continued to fight with extreme aggression. Suddenly, Lucas noticed that Zephyr was quietly gathering its mana. With one look, he realized what the draconic lion was doing. "We can do this, Zephyr. I'll buy you time." Lucas squinted his eyes as he forced the winged goblin monarch to keep its focus entirely on him. This way, it wouldn't be able to sense Zephyr's unusual movements. About 5 minutes later, Lucas suddenly kicked the winged goblin monarch, which made it lose balance in midair. "Zephyr, now!" he shouted. Upon hearing his words, Zephyr opened its mouth and spat out a giant ball of flame. Whoosh! Caught unprepared by the unexpected attack, the winged goblin monarch couldn't defend itself from the ball of fire. It was struck, and its body was quickly engulfed by the fearsome flames. Zaza! Roar! The beast roared in pain and fury as it tried to expel the flames using its mana. Seeing this, Lucas immediately rushed towards the monster and released a series of slashes that carried tremendous force. "Do you think I will let you escape?" Whoosh! Whoosh! The winged goblin monarch was focused on expelling the flames from its body, so it was late to react to Lucas's attacks. In the next moment, one of its arms was cut off, and it also received a long laceration on its chest that exposed its bones. Roar! The winged goblin monarch collapsed on the ground, grimacing as it grabbed its bleeding shoulder. It managed to remove the flames from its body, but it was still steaming from the heat. With furious eyes, it glared at Lucas. It was as if it wanted to tear him apart. "I don't like the look in your eyes," Lucas muttered as he slowly approached the monster. His sword was emitting a terrifying amount of energy that made it produce a sharp wailing sound. Even the monster could feel the enormous mana his sword was emitting. Fear flashed in its eyes for the first time since they fought. Lucas smiled faintly when he saw this. "So you also know how to make that kind of face." Just then, he tapped his foot and his figure vanished all of a sudden. Like a mirage, he appeared in front of the winged goblin monarch and stabbed it with his sword. "CHK." The winged goblin monarch lowered its head and looked at the sword that had pierced through its chest. Its eyes were filled with disbelief. "Don't worry. Your beast soul crystal will not be wasted." Lucas's mocking voice drifted into its ears. It raised its head and saw Lucas staring at it with a sharp gaze. D. Lucas's face contorted with fury as he unleashed a fearsome wave of mana. The terrifying amount of energy tore a fist-sized hole in the beast's body. The winged goblin monarch lifelessly fell to the ground, blood leaking out from the hole in its chest. Lucas stared deeply at its corpse and flicked his sword. Turning his head, he saw that Vulcan and the others were still fighting against the half-kobold beast. I need to help them. He gathered his mana and was about to rush over when he felt a sharp pain in his energy core. Shit, did I overexert myself? He gritted his teeth and clutched his chest, sweat trickling down his face. He then felt a stabbing sensation in his head that made him grimace. Art. Lucas staggered towards a nearby tree. He found himself feeling nauseous and he had this urge to vomit. Not now. Grimacing, he grabbed his head as he leaned against the tree. Why did it have to be now? Damn it. Chapter 423, Alaric's Rage. While Lucas was having trouble with his energy core, the battle against the half-kobold monster was becoming more bloody. The combined troops of Vulcan and Garandel, which numbered around 80,000, were almost reduced by half in just half an hour. Tens of thousands of corpses were strewn across the grasslands, painting the greenery with red. It was a gruesome scene that made everyone feel uncomfortable. However, the battle must continue. At this moment, Vulcan's armor had already been torn apart, so he was forced to discard it. With his upper body exposed, he received numerous cuts and bruises which left him teetering on the edge. He had expended a huge portion of his mana and he could barely stand on his feet. "Commander, are you all right?" An elven warrior rushed to his side and placed his arm around Vulcan's waist to keep him from falling. Breathing heavily, Vulcan replied in a weak voice, "As you can see, I'm no longer in the best condition to fight." More warriors crowded around him, staring at him with concern. Vulcan had always been at the very front, making sure that everyone was protected. If it weren't for him, more warriors would have perished. Everyone greatly respected him. Even the proud and arrogant elves who held the barbarians in disdain admired this brave warrior. "You should get some rest, Commander. We will handle things here," one of the warriors said. "No." Vulcan shook his head. Without him, the monster would be unstoppable. Garandel and the other experts wouldn't be able to stop a beast at this level by themselves. While they were at their wits' end, a figure suddenly rushed towards them. "Someone's coming," a warrior exclaimed. Everyone furrowed their eyebrows and turned their heads. When they saw who was coming, their eyes revealed a hint of delight. It was Alaric. Moreover, he didn't come on his own. There were thousands of warriors following him, including one transcendent barbarian warrior. "It's His Highness Alaric." Vulcan was also pleasantly surprised. The addition of 2 transcendents would greatly lessen their burden. Meanwhile, Alaric frowned when he saw the corpses of their comrades lying across the grassland. His eyes flashed with rage. "Brothers, follow me to kill that beast," he roared as he charged towards the half-kobold. The monster sensed his arrival and immediately released invisible spirit attacks on their way. Alaric waved his swords and used his powerful senses to detect the spirit attacks. Bang! Bang! However, even with his efforts, hundreds of warriors still perished under the fearsome attacks. This was the scariest thing about spirit-based monsters. Their attacks were difficult to predict and almost unnoticeable. Not to mention that this was a catastrophe-grade beast. The deaths of the warriors fueled Alaric's rage. He moved with ghost-like steps, nimbly evading the spirit arrows. When he reached a certain distance, the half-kobold felt threatened. Its expression darkened. With a raise of its arm, an overwhelming pressure descended and fell upon his body. What is this pressure? He took an abrupt halt as he tried to free himself from the pressure, but to no avail. What kind of attack is this? Alaric quickly used appraisal on the monster. Treacherous Spirit Kobold, Catastrophe Grade EXP, 4777/10,000. Potential S. Innate Ability, Demonic Aura SS. Spirit Arrow S. Beast Control S. Mana Regeneration S. Mental Power S. Dream Illusion S. Strength 553. Stamina 700. Agility, 601. Vitality, 759. Endurance, 777. Mana, 900. Most of its innate abilities are spirit-based. With its high mana, prolonging this battle would only make things worse for us. We need to kill it now. Suddenly, Alaric struck with tremendous force that freed him from the pressure. Whoosh! His slash left a trail of ice in the air. The monster was surprised. It didn't expect that a mere transcendent knight would be able to overcome its demonic aura. With a quick leap, Alaric slashed out his sword. His attack carried a chill that froze the surrounding air. Whoosh! The treacherous spirit kobold snorted and destroyed his attack using its spirit arrows. Bang! Bang! I have underestimated you, human. Now go and die, it shouted, its eyes burning with beastly rage. In the next moment, Alaric found himself trapped in an illusion. He could hear the warriors screaming as if they were warning him. In front of Alaric was an endless darkness, a dark void that bound his body in this seemingly infinite world of nihility. After what seemed to be an eternity, he regained his consciousness. When he gathered his senses, he saw Neo in front of him with a bloody hole in his chest. Elder Neo! Alaric's face fell. He knew in that instant that Neo had taken a hit for him. Neo fell on his knees, his face pale. You can't die here, Your Highness. Ivana! That girl still needs you. Alaric rushed to his side and injected his mana into the High Elf's body to stop the bleeding. Don't waste your mana. I won't make it. Neo pushed his hand away.
No.
Stop saying that. Alaric felt a wave of sadness. Neo suddenly grabbed his hand and mumbled. She is like a daughter to me. You must protect her. After saying those words, Neo's body fell into Alaric's arms. Elder Neo! Alaric checked his pulse, but he sensed no heartbeat. He was dead. Alaric raised his head and roared. Ah! His roar was filled with grief and rage. He stood up and handed Neo's corpse to an elven warrior. Please take his body somewhere safe. Don't let those monsters desecrate his body. Yes, Your Highness. The elven warrior felt a chill in his heart when he saw Alaric's expression. With a whoosh, Alaric's figure blurred and reappeared hundreds of meters away in just a blink of an eye. He rushed towards the half-kobold monster that was currently massacring thousands of warriors. Upon gaining momentum, he leaped into the air and released a slash that almost emptied his energy core. You filthy beast! He bellowed, his face contorted with fury. Chapter 424. Dangerous Gamble. The half-kobold monster was occupied with its frenzied slaughter. Its entire body was covered in the blood of the warriors it had slain. You filthy beast! The sudden shout surprised the monster. When it turned around, it saw a beam of light that carried an overwhelming, freezing coldness. So cold, it thought with its eyes wide open. Bang! Everyone became deathly silent. The spirit-based catastrophe-grade monster, a beast that had killed tens of thousands of warriors, was turned into a block of ice. No one could believe what they had witnessed. A transcendent knight was not meant to defeat a monster at this level, but Alaric did the impossible. With a slash of his sword, he froze the terrifying monster. Alaric landed on the ground, breathing heavily as he looked at the frozen monster. He did it. His Highness defeated the last catastrophe-grade beast. Someone exclaimed. Oh my God! What kind of sword technique was that? Everyone was shocked, their faces filled with a mixture of admiration, disbelief, and astonishment. In the midst of their cheer, Alaric's face showed no joy or excitement for his victory. This was because there was still no notification from the system. This could mean two things. First, the half-kobold monster was still alive, so the system didn't recognize the completion of the mission. The second one was that he still had to thoroughly destroy or wipe out the monster colony for the mission to be completed. Doing the second one would be no problem. Even without his help, the warriors would be able to take care of the remaining monsters on their own. However, if it was the first one, thinking about this, Alaric's face darkened. Wait, the monster could still be alive. We need to make sure that it's dead, he shouted, his voice filled with urgency. Given their current situation, no one was in perfect condition to fight the half-kobold monster. When his words fell, everyone panicked. What? It's still alive? There's no way. How could that be possible? Garandel rushed towards Alaric's side and asked, his face looking incredibly pale. Do you think it's still alive? Alaric nodded. It's a catastrophe-grade beast. Monsters at this level have higher regeneration abilities. Killing them wouldn't be easy. We need to make sure that it's dead. His recent attack might be powerful enough to threaten a catastrophe-grade beast, but the treacherous spirit kobold had one innate ability that made him uncertain. It was the S-Rank health restoration. Garandel nodded at his words. You should get some rest. Leave this to me. Alaric frowned with a hesitant look. Seeing his expression, Garandel snorted. Don't underestimate me. I might not look like it, but I'm close to becoming a mythical knight. Besides, I won't be alone. He pointed to the remaining transcendents. Although they were injured, most of them still had the strength to fight. Alaric stared deeply at the Elven King and nodded. I leave it in your hands, your majesty. Garandel chuckled while shaking his head. Didn't I tell you to call me uncle? Without waiting for Alaric's response, the Elven King led the Transcendents to attack the frozen half-kobold monster. In the next moment, a series of powerful attacks were launched upon the beast. Bang! 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 Violent explosions erupted one after another. The shockwave from the blast created a cloud of dust that obscured everyone's vision. Alaric squinted his eyes while trying to see beyond the dust. When the air cleared, everyone saw something that made them horrified. The half-kobold monster, which everyone presumed was dead, was now standing still while eyeing the surroundings with its eyes filled with brutal savagery. Meanwhile, Garandel and the rest of the transcendent experts were lying on the ground, trembling. They had failed to kill the monster. Moreover, their situation had become more dire. Suddenly, the monster turned its big head. Its gaze stopped on Alaric. You are a threat to me. You must die. It let out a shrill scream as it summoned a wave of spirit arrows. Whoosh! 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 Gritting his teeth, Alaric pushed his body to its absolute limit. He could feel his muscles screaming with pain as he evaded the fatal strikes. Bang! Bang! Somehow he managed to dodge the spirit arrows. Blood leaked out from his nose. He felt as if his head were spinning. Alaric grabbed his head and forced himself to stay awake. Not now. I won't fall just yet. I don't know what will happen if I do this, but there is no choice. After making his resolve, Alaric took a deep breath to feel the last trace of mana in his energy core. He was planning to stimulate his exhausted energy core. Normally, the energy core would leave a small amount of mana to protect itself from breaking. Once this trace of mana was forcibly tapped into, one would risk destroying their energy core. However, Alaric couldn't care less. The veins in his body protruded and blood rushed out from his 7 orifices. Arg! An overwhelming wave of pain traveled through his body. He felt as if 1,000 sledgehammers were being hammered into his entire being. Gritting his teeth, Alaric staggered as he performed another sword technique. Waves of mana were channeled into his sword, slowly filling it with tremendous power. The half-kobold monster sensed this and revealed a wary look. I must stop you, human, it muttered in a cold voice. While Alaric was gathering his power in one final sword strike, the monster lifted its arm and conjured hundreds of spirit arrows. Everyone watched the scene with ever-changing expressions. There was helplessness, anticipation, hope, and terror. Right at this moment, a beaten figure suddenly rushed towards Alaric, grabbing a broken shield from the ground. It was Vulcan. Kill it, Alaric. I will protect you, he shouted. Alaric heard his voice, but his focus was entirely on his sword. Suddenly, the half-kobold monster abruptly lowered its arm, its face contorting with rage.
Die Human Warrior. Chapter 425. Totale Destruction.
Just when the spirit arrows were about to hit Alaric, Vulcan appeared out of nowhere with a broken shield in his hand. Grunting, the barbarian warrior blocked all the spirit arrows that were about to fall on Alaric. Arg! Vulcan grimaced. The spirit arrows penetrated the broken shield and pierced through his arms, but he ignored the pain and kept the shield in front to protect Alaric. "You will have to step over my dead body first before you can kill him," he roared. At some point, the broken shield was torn apart and all the spirit arrows fell upon Vulcan's body. CHK. CHKK. The spirit arrows penetrated through his flesh and left bloody holes that made him bleed profusely. However, he stubbornly resisted until the last spirit arrow struck his chest. He staggered and fell on his knees, gasping for breath. At this moment, Alaric had gathered enough energy to release his sword strike. With one powerful swing, he slashed out his sword. Whoosh! His attack carried an immensely dominant force that destroyed everything in its path. This terrifying sword energy struck the half-kobold monster's body with a bam. What followed was a deafening explosion that shook the grasslands. Everyone was forced to cover their ears with mana. The residual force also pushed them back a couple of steps. When the dust settled, everyone was startled. In front of them was a long crack that stretched hundreds of meters, as if an immortal had cleaved the land with his sword. It was an unbelievable sight. As for the half-kobold monster, it was lying in its own pool of blood, and a huge portion of its lower body was missing. Its eyes were wide open, but it was no longer breathing. It was dead. Meanwhile, Alaric had also collapsed on the ground, his condition unknown. There was a brief moment of silence. This was more shocking than what they had witnessed earlier. There was never a time when a transcendent knight had killed a catastrophe-grade monster. It was a common logic that everyone gradually learned to accept. However, today it has been proven to be wrong. After a moment of shock, the injured Garandel recovered his senses. "Quick! Find our healers and have them treated," he shouted as he carried his injured body towards the Alaric and Vulcan. In his haste, he stumbled and almost fell to the ground, but a hand caught him just in time. "Your Majesty, let me help you." It was Rosalie, the Grand Elder of the Greenwood Kingdom and a three-ringed beast soul master. She was also present throughout the entire battle, so she witnessed everything that had unfolded. Until now, she was still reeling in shock. The young human warrior who had helped them back then had already transformed into a formidable warrior that even she had to look up to. The unexpected twist of fate left her with a sense of incredulity. "Thank you," Garandel mumbled weakly. The Elven King was also nearly killed in that battle. His strong physical body saved his life. A group of healers came to treat the injured, but everyone unanimously agreed to prioritize Alaric and Vulcan for the treatment. "How are they?" Garandel asked while looking at the healers. One of them answered, his face looking grim. "Commander Vulcan is not in good condition. He lost too much blood and his energy core is exhausted. The silver lining is that none of his vital organs are damaged. He can still be treated, but it will take a long time before he can recover. As for His Highness Alaric," the healer seemed hesitant to speak. "Spit it out." Garandel furrowed his eyebrows, the volume of his voice rising. He overstimulated his energy core, which caused it to fracture. This also brought severe damage to his internal organs. Treatment is almost impossible, and even if he miraculously recovered, there is a high chance that his strength would deteriorate. Garandel's face fell upon hearing this. It wasn't just him. Everyone's faces darkened. To a warrior, their strength was equivalent to their lives. Many would rather commit suicide than live as a cripple for the rest of their life. Is there no hope for him to recover? A concerned voice drifted into everyone's ears. Everyone turned their heads and saw Lucas walking unsteadily towards them using his sword as a crutch. The healers glanced at each other, shaking their heads. They didn't say anything, but everyone understood what that meant. Lucas fell on his knees upon hearing this. "Alaric, my son." Overcome with emotions, the voice of the mighty venerable trembled. Garandel approached Lucas, his face filled with guilt and remorse.
"I'm sorry, Lucas.
It's all my fault. If only." Lucas raised his hand and forced a smile. "Please don't say such things." We chose to help you because we are allies. You don't need to blame yourself. Ashamed, Garandel covered his face to hide his tears. Your Majesty! Rosalie stared at the Elven King with a deep sigh. Boom! A loud explosion interrupted the atmosphere. Lucas raised his head and lifted his weary body. The battle isn't over yet. There are still thousands of monsters in the nest. Let's talk once everything is settled. He spoke before he headed in the direction of the commotion. Hearing this, Garandel sent everyone a look and said, For those of you who can still fight, please follow me to eliminate the remaining monsters. The rest will stay here to guard our injured comrades. Yes, Your Majesty. With that, the warriors who still had the energy to spare rushed towards the nest to kill the remaining monster. Another gruesome battle followed, but this time, there was no powerful monster to stop them. Everyone was fueled by their rage. The deaths of their comrades filled them with strength. In the next few hours, thousands upon thousands of monsters were annihilated. Even the young and old weren't spared. It was a total massacre. What remained of the monster nest was also set ablaze. A fearsome flame engulfed the complex cave systems, obliterating everything. Chapter 426. Alaric awakens. Alaric opened his eyes and found himself surrounded by corpses. There was blood everywhere and all the buildings had collapsed. It was like an apocalypse. He lifted his body and looked around, observing the surroundings with trembling eyes. I recognized this place. His gaze was frozen with disbelief when he realized where he was. This is where I died. Suddenly, he felt a sharp stabbing pain in his head. Arg! Grimacing, Alaric grabbed his head. Your Highness, you're awake? A surprised voice drifted into his ears. When he opened his eyes, he found out that he was no longer in that apocalyptic nightmare. Above him was an unfamiliar ceiling. The strong smell of medicinal herbs lingered in the air. Where am I? He wanted to get up, but a sudden burst of pain coursed through his body. Your Highness, please don't move around carelessly. Your stitches might open up. Aldrin's concerned face came into his view. Aldrin? Where am I? A weak, almost inaudible voice leaked out of his mouth. Aldrin took a deep breath and replied, This is a recovery room constructed by the Elven royal family. They wanted Your Highness to be comfortable, so they used Estania's architectural design when they built this facility. Hearing his response, Alaric let out a sigh. So we are in the Greenwood Kingdom. That's right. With a deep look, Alaric asked, What happened to the monster colony? Aldrin's face turned serious as he answered, We destroyed the colony. We won the battle, Your Highness. Looking at his gloomy expression, Alaric no longer said anything. For Aldrin to reveal that kind of face, we must have suffered disastrous losses. After a moment of silence, Aldrin spoke. I will inform Lord Lucas and the others that Your Highness has woken up. Amen. Alaric hummed in response. I'm glad that you have awakened, Your Highness. It has been 3 weeks since you lost consciousness. Aldrin bowed to Alaric and left. 3 weeks? Alaric was stunned. He wanted to ask him something, but Aldrin had already left. I was out for that long? He tried to sense his mana, but then he suddenly felt an uncomfortable feeling in his chest. It was as if thousands of ants were gnawing at his flesh. What is going on? He gritted his teeth, his face full of sweat. I can't use my mana. His face fell and he quickly summoned the system. It was then that the familiar interface appeared in front of him. Undersir. Mission complete. Rewards, 6,500 battle points, 1,000 EXP, 250 stat points, Transcendent Knight card X1, Random Trait Upgrade card X2, S-Rank Trait card X1. Undersir. Alaric Silversword, Transcendent Knight, EXP, 143, 1143/5000. Potential S. Traits, Swordsmanship, SSS. Ruthless Slaughterer, SS. Horseback Riding B. Close Combat B. Sixth Sense B. Appraisals B. Hunting C. Tracking C. Monster Affinity C. Mana gathering C, archery D, strength 343, stamina 335, agility 335, vitality 315, endurance 315,
Mana, 340.
battle points 4,220, 10720, stat points 250. Requirements for the next advancement: 5,000 EXP, 500 in all attributes, and 25,000 battle points. Looking at the big leap in his attributes, he let out a heavy sigh. So we won. Huh? Strangely, he didn't feel happy. In fact, he felt the exact opposite. Do you want to use your random trait upgrade cards? Yes. No. Alaric clicked no and closed the system screen. At this moment, he heard a series of footsteps outside. Alaric. Lucas stepped in with a group of people. All of them looked relieved upon seeing that Alaric was awake. My lord. Alaric forced a smile while looking at his father. Garandel and a few important people were also there, so he gave each of them a nod. I'm sorry if I couldn't greet everyone properly. It's all right. You are still recovering. There is no need for you to worry about the minor details. Your health is more important. Garandel smiled faintly at him. Alaric looked at the Elven King and saw an exhausted face. Thank you for your understanding. The Elven King looked like he had much to say, but in the end, he only spoke a few words before he left with the others. Only Lucas and Alaric remained inside the room. Lucas stared at his son with a complicated expression. How do you feel, son? Why is Dad giving me that kind of look? Alaric was curious, but he didn't ask. I can barely move from the neck down. I also can't sense my energy core. He responded. Lucas sighed upon hearing this. He grabbed a chair and placed it next to the bed. He then took his seat and carefully placed his hand on his son's shoulder. With a forced smile, he said, Don't worry about it, son. Even without mana, you are still the heir of House Silversword. Nothing can change that. Alaric was baffled by his father's words. What do you mean, Dad? Lucas leaned on the chair with a gloomy expression. The healers said that your energy core can no longer recover. Samaya stopped it from completely breaking, but even she couldn't heal it. Alaric fell silent. Samaya was a subordinate of his birth mother. She was a 3-ringed beast soulmaster with the S-Rank Ultimate Heal integrated monster trait. If a skill at that level couldn't heal his damaged energy core, it meant that recovery was close to impossible. Then why did the system still recognize me as a transcendent knight? I don't believe that there is no more hope for my energy core to recover. Thinking about this, his expression eased up and he gradually regained his calmness. What happened to Commander Vulcan? During the battle against the treacherous spirit Kobold, he saw Vulcan using his body to protect him. It was because of him that he was able to deliver that final sword strike against the beast. Hearing him mention this, Lucas smiled faintly. Vulcan is recovering in a separate room. He had awakened 2 weeks earlier than you. He is a tough guy, so you don't need to worry about him. Alaric was relieved to hear this. Chapter 427. Visiting Elder Neos' grave. Lucas left soon after chatting with his son. After he left, a group of healers and medical practitioners came to check his condition. They gave him some medicine and changed his bandages before leaving the room. Once everyone had left, Alaric opened the system screen and used his rewards. Do you want to use your random trait upgrade cards? Alaric clicked yes. Your trait horseback riding, B, has been upgraded to horseback riding A. Your trait close combat, B, has been upgraded to close combat A. Alaric didn't stop there. Do you want to use your S-Rank trait card? Yes. No. After clicking yes, a notification popped up in front of him. You have awakened the trait Supreme Regeneration, S. As soon as he received this message, he felt a sudden change in his body. The sense of discomfort he was feeling earlier gradually vanished and was replaced with a cool sensation that traveled through his entire body. He had never felt this kind of comfort before, but if there was something to compare it with, It was oddly similar to the feeling of relaxing in a hot spring. Suddenly, he felt a trace of mana slowly moving towards his chest. This is mana. He was pleasantly surprised. It must be because of my new trait. He knew for sure that it was related to the new trait Supreme Regeneration. An S-rank trait is indeed exceptional. He smiled faintly. Just then, he heard the knocking on his door. Knock! 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 He closed the system screen and cleared his throat. Come in. It's open. In the next moment, Ivana stepped inside, her face displaying all sorts of emotions. I came here after hearing that you have regained consciousness. She stood by his side and observed his complexion. Her voice was cold, but Alaric could sense the worry in her eyes. I'm fine. He smiled faintly. Ivana stared deeply at him and said in a trembling voice, Today is the funeral of Elder Neo and Elder Dahan. Hearing this, Alaric recalled the scene before Neo's death. The High Elf took a fatal blow to save him. It's my fault. If I hadn't come back thoughtlessly, Elder Neo wouldn't have. Alaric felt a wave of remorse. Neo was like a father to Ivana. He felt guilty about his death. Tears slid down from Ivana's eyes as she muttered, Elder Neo, I miss him. She broke down in tears. Looking at her distraught face, Alaric wanted to comfort her, but no words came out of his mouth. He could only watch as she cried her eyes out. He wanted to take her into his arms, but he couldn't even move his body. This left him with an unprecedented feeling of helplessness and grief.
I'm sorry.
It's all my fault. Alaric's eyes turned bloodshot as he held back the urge to cry. After a long time, Ivana wiped off her tears and looked at him. My mind is a mess right now. I will be back in a few days. Without waiting for his response, she turned around and left. After she left, Alaric felt empty. He cried in silence. Unknowingly, he drifted into sleep. The next morning, Alaric opened his eyes. He tried moving his arms and realized that he could already move a bit. It was a small progress, but it made him relieved. In a few more days, I should be able to get up, he thought to himself. And so, 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. After taking his medicine, Alaric got up from the bed with the help of Aldrin. You should take it easy, Your Highness. The healer said that you shouldn't move around for the next 2 weeks. Aldrin reminded him out of concern. Grimacent, Alaric stood up, his face covered in sweat. I won't overdo it, I promise, he replied while forcing out a smile. I hope so. Shaking his head, Aldrin sighed helplessly. With Aldrin's support, Alaric could already manage to walk. Do you know where Elder Neo and the others are buried? He asked. Hearing this, Aldrin nodded, and a wave of sadness flashed in his eyes. Yes, Your Highness. Please take me there. I would like to pay my respects. Aldrin hesitated for a moment, but he relented upon seeing Alaric's expression. All right, but we need to bring Dame Samaya with us. Alaric understood his intentions, so he nodded his head. That is fine by me. Please wait here for a moment. I will bring her over. Aldrin bowed and left with haste. A quarter of an hour later, he returned with a beautiful woman wearing a green elven dress. Greetings, Your Highness. Samaya curtsied upon stepping inside the room. Alaric waved his hand and said, There is no need for formalities. He then turned his head to Aldrin and sent him a knowing look. Let's go. Please excuse me, Your Highness. Aldrin grabbed Alaric's arm and wrapped it around his shoulder. Alaric was still having trouble walking on his own, so he carefully supported him. Outside the recovery facility, a carriage was already waiting for them. There was also a team composed of 20 warriors to escort them. Greetings, Your Highness. The warriors greeted him in unison. Alaric nodded to acknowledge their presence. Aldrin and Samaya helped him sit comfortably inside the carriage. After making sure that everything was in place, Aldrin communicated with the coachman. Start the carriage. Yes, sir. The coachman slapped the horses and the carriage soon moved forward. The escort team followed closely on their horses. The elves had a tradition to bury their dead underneath a tree. Each deceased elf was buried underneath a different tree. They said that it was a way to send them back to nature. 30 minutes later, the carriage stopped in front of a tall tree filled with healthy green leaves. Alaric stepped out of the carriage with the help of Samaya and Aldrin. The duo brought him closer to the tree. "So this is where Elder Neo is buried," Alaric mumbled as he looked at the towering tree.
Chapter 428, Samia's surprise.
Alaric placed his palm on the tree and closed his eyes. "Aru, please guide his soul to your divine kingdom." After solemnly praying for Neo's soul, Alaric bowed deeply, which caused some of his wounds to open up. "Your Highness!" Samaya wanted to help him, but Aldrin raised his hand and signaled her not to interrupt Alaric. "His Highness is paying respects to the man who saved his life. He deserves this respect and honor," Aldrin reminded her in a stern voice. "He was present during the battle against the catastrophe-grade beasts. He saw everything that had happened, including Neo's selfless sacrifice." Samaya sighed and mumbled, her words trailing. "I'm only worried that His Highness' wounds might—" Aldrin ignored her, turned around, and looked at Alaric. After half an hour, Alaric motioned for Aldrin to support him. Aldrin noticed blood seeping through his bandages, so he sent Samaya a knowing look. Sensing his gaze, Samaya approached Alaric and said, "Please excuse me, Your Highness." Alaric didn't stop her and allowed her to do her task. With his permission, Samaya used her ultimate heal on Alaric, which brought the latter some relief. He also felt that his wounds had closed up significantly. "Your Highness, you shouldn't move around excessively in the next few days. Without sufficient mana, your recovery speed is what it used to be. Even with the help of my integrated trait, your body is not responding well to the healing," Samaya said in a chiding tone. Alaric was already used to her nagging, so he just nodded his head. "I will be careful." Samaya could only helplessly shake her head at his lack of concern. The trio left soon after and headed back to the carriage. "Where do we go next, Your Highness?" Aldrin asked. Alaric thought for a moment while adjusting his posture to a more comfortable sitting position. Suddenly, he remembered something. "You said that Elder Dahan was also killed in battle." Hearing this, Aldrin nodded with a gloomy expression. "That's right. I heard from the others that he was with Sir Butch at that time. According to them, Sir Butch and Elder Dahan led 5,000 warriors to block tens of thousands of monsters. It was because of them that no monsters were able to interfere during our battle with the catastrophe-grade beasts." Upon hearing this, Alaric recalled Dahan's face. He was a stubborn but loyal high elf. He was always in the most dangerous position during battles. He was a brave elven warrior. "Bring me to his grave," Alaric spoke. "Yes, Your Highness." Aldrin nodded and immediately informed the coachman of their next destination. Dahan's remains were buried underneath another tree which wasn't that far from where Neo was buried. It only took them about 5 minutes of travel to get there. Surprisingly, there was someone visiting Dahan's grave, and it was a familiar person. It was a tall and muscular warrior wearing a mask. "Sir Butch." Aldrin and Samaya greeted the man. Butch nodded at them and bowed to greet Alaric. "Your Highness." Alaric waved his hand to acknowledge his greeting. The group walked towards the tree where Dahan was buried. "Was he a friend?" Alaric asked while keeping his eyes on the tree. Butch knew that the question was meant for him, so he responded while shaking his head. "No. He wasn't a friend, but he was willing to risk his life to protect mine. If not for him, I might have perished that day." Butch's voice sounded harsh due to the effects of the relic-level mask he was wearing, so they couldn't tell what he was feeling. "He saved you, so he must have been a good man." "He was. But do I deserve his sacrifice?" Alaric turned his head to look at him. Butch's eyes were trembling. It was almost imperceptible, but Alaric saw it clearly. "He must have seen something in you that is worth sacrificing his life for. Don't question your own worth, Sir Butch. You are an amazing person." Alaric smiled faintly. Butch's shoulder shook. He lowered his head and stayed silent. After praying for Dahan's soul, the group didn't linger for long. "Are you coming with us, Sir Butch?" asked Alaric while looking at the big fellow. Butch lowered his head. Yes, Your Highness. In that case, let us head back to the recovery facility. In the next moment, the group left. Upon returning to the recovery facility, Samaya and two of her assistants helped Alaric remove his bandages. Samaya furrowed her eyebrows. Alaric's wounds had closed up significantly. Most of the minor cuts on his body were gone and had only left scars. This was something she didn't expect. After Alaric's energy core was damaged, his body rejected mana, which slowed down his recovery. She thought that it would take a few more months for his wounds to completely heal and turn into scars. Is his energy core? Her eyes flashed with surprise. She placed her fingers on his wrist and injected him mana. To her amazement, his body no longer rejected her mana. His energy core seemed to have healed a bit. How is this possible? She found it unbelievable. She had been inspecting his energy core in the past few days, and she was so sure that there was hope for it to recover. Your Highness, please excuse me. I need to inspect your energy core further. She spoke with a serious look. Alaric didn't stop her. Go ahead. After getting his permission, Samaya immediately began her work. As she examined closely, her expression changed multiple times. Alaric was amused when he saw this. She must have noticed the changes. He couldn't blame her. Even he was surprised by how quickly his body was recovering ever since he awakened the S-Rank Supreme Regeneration trait. Coupled with Samaya's ultimate healing and the elven medication he took, the results were remarkable. It's a miracle. Your Highness' energy core is recovering. Moreover, I can sense a small trace of mana circling your energy core. This is a good sign, Samaya exclaimed. Chapter 429. Visiting Vulcan. After a more thorough checkup, Samaya confirmed that his energy core was recovering. I need to inform Lord Lucas about this. I hope you don't mind, Your Highness, Samaya said while helping him change his bandages. I don't mind. Alaric shook his head. There was no point in hiding his recovery. His father was also looking incredibly distraught over the past few days because of his condition. Letting Lucas know that he was recovering would help the former feel relieved. Samaya made him drink another set of medicine before she left the room with haste. A moment later, the assistants also left, leaving him alone. I still have the Transcendent Knight card, but I can't use it while I'm here. I wouldn't be able to escape questioning if an unknown Transcendent Knight would show up. Alaric thought to himself. He couldn't wait to use the card, but he held back the urge. A few minutes later, he heard a series of footsteps outside the room. Creak. In the next moment, the door sprang open and Lucas stepped in with an urgent look on his face. Alaric. He rushed to Alaric's side and inspected him closely. He was a mythical knight, so he quickly noticed the small stream of mana coursing through his son's body. It's true. Your body is no longer rejecting mana, he exclaimed. Samaya and a few others entered the room a moment later. Their faces were covered in sweat and they were breathing heavily. Looking at them, Alaric could tell that they had rushed to get here. Lucas looked like he had a lot more to say, but he held back since there were other people around. He placed his hand on his son's shoulder and smiled faintly. I'm so glad that you are recovering well, my son. I will come back tonight to speak with you. Yes, my lord. Alaric nodded with a light smile. Lucas said a few more words before he left the room. It seemed that he had matters to attend to, so Alaric didn't stop him from leaving so soon. A few barbarian chieftains also visited Alaric. They were present when he fought with the treacherous spirit Kobold, so they all greatly respected him. The barbarians were known to favor the brave and the strong, so Alaric wasn't surprised by their attitudes. Your Highness, Vulcan would like to have a word with you, a barbarian chieftain suddenly said. Just as Alaric was about to respond, Samaya immediately interjected. Your Highness, we just changed your bandages. You shouldn't move around for the time being. It wouldn't be good for your recovery. Alaric sighed helplessly. I know, but if it weren't for him. Shaking her head, Samaya could only force a smile. Fine. We will just change your bandages again. Hearing this, Alaric chuckled. He then turned his head to the barbarian chieftain who had spoken about Vulcan. "Bring me to his room." "Yes, your highness." Aldrin didn't wait for Alaric to say anything. He walked by his side and helped him get up. "Be careful, your highness," he whispered. Alaric nodded without saying a word. After that, the group headed to Vulcan's room, which wasn't far from where Alaric was staying. However, there was an unexpected visitor. Everyone was taken aback when they saw Ivana walking along the hallway. Alaric saw the surprise in her eyes when she saw him. "You can already walk?" she asked with a hint of disbelief. She had visited him from time to time while he was still unconscious, so she was aware of his condition. "How could this be? I thought he wouldn't be able to walk for a few months." Alaric gestured for everyone to give them some space. The group understood his intentions and immediately distanced themselves. They even blocked off their hearing using mana to give them privacy. Aldrin hesitated for a moment, but he also took a few steps back after seeing Alaric's gaze. Ivana approached him, sizing him up. "I heard that your energy core has shown signs of recovery." Alaric nodded. "Amen. That's good." The atmosphere became awkward all of a sudden. "I visited Elder Neos' grave." Ivana's eyes dimmed when he mentioned this. "I see. I owe him my life." "You do. Where are you guys headed to?" Ivana quickly changed the topic. Looking at her face, it was apparent that she was still shaken about Neos' death. "I heard that Vulcan wants to speak with me," Alaric replied. "It must be for something important. You should go and see him. We can chat later." Ivana didn't wait for his response, turned around, and left. Alaric took a deep breath as he watched her leave. A moment later, he beckoned to Aldrin and the others. "Let's go. We can't let Vulcan wait." "Yes, your highness." The group walked along the hallway, and after a few turns, they arrived in front of Vulcan's room. Aldrin knocked on the door to announce their arrival. "Commander Vulcan, His Highness has come to see you. The door is unlocked. Please come in." Vulcan's weary voice drifted into their ears. Upon stepping in, Alaric saw Vulcan lying on the bed in the middle of the room. There were splints and casts wrapped around his limbs. He also had a neck brace to support his head. "Your Highness, I apologize for my lack of courtesy. As you can see, I am not in the best condition to open the door myself." Vulcan chuckled lightheartedly. Seeing him in this state, Alaric let out a sigh. "I'm glad to see you in good spirits, Commander Vulcan. Please drop the honorifics, Your Highness. The war is already over. Just call me by my name." Vulcan smiled faintly. Alaric shook his head. "That won't do. You are my father's friend. I'll call you Sir Vulcan instead." "All right, whatever suits you." Vulcan shrugged. He then sized up Alaric, his eyes showing a glimmer of surprise. "It seems like Your Highness has made a great recovery. With the help of a great medical team, I am recovering well." Alaric smiled faintly. Chapter 430, 1 month. The two exchanged pleasantries before they went to the topic. "I thought we were all going to die at that time," Vulcan suddenly said, his face displaying a hint of fear. Alaric understood what he meant by those words. "But then I saw how you fought." Vulcan raised his head. His eyes flashed with a glimmer of admiration. "A young transcendent knight with the courage and determination to face a catastrophe-grade beast. That's when I knew that only you have the power to slay that catastrophe-grade beast, and you didn't fail me." Vulcan smiled faintly. "You are probably the first in the Empire to achieve such a feat. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that you have the same level of talent as the legendary warriors of the ancient era." Alaric chuckled with a look of embarrassment. This was the highest praise he received from someone other than his family. "I don't deserve your praise, Sir Vulcan. Without everyone's support, I wouldn't have slain that beast. I don't dare claim that I can fight a catastrophe-grade beast on my own. At least not at the moment." Vulcan scoffed. "Look at this guy acting so humble. You sound just like your father during his youth." Alaric laughed awkwardly. He never thought that Vulcan was actually the chatty type of guy. He spoke non-stop for over an hour, and Alaric only nodded his head while pretending to listen. After a long while, Vulcan noticed that Alaric was getting bored, so he shooed him off. You look tired. You should get some rest. Hearing this, Alaric didn't insist on staying and nodded. I had fun talking with you, Sir Vulcan. If you need someone to talk to, don't hesitate to call me. Vulcan snorted. This kid really knows how to pretend. Alaric acted like he didn't hear his words and left with the help of Aldrin and Samaya. After they left, a figure emerged from behind the curtain and muttered with an exasperated tone. Did you really need to spout nonsense for an hour? I was nearly suffocated standing behind the curtain while listening to your bullcrap. Vulcan stared mockingly at Lucas. Who told you to hide behind the curtain? Lucas chuckled dryly as he took his seat by his side. Thank you. Vulcan raised an eyebrow. What are you thanking me for? Lucas leaned on his seat and smiled. I knew you spoke all that nonsense to get rid of my son's guilt. Vulcan scoffed. Stop saying such embarrassing things and just peel those oranges for me. Alaric's treatment continued for another month. His body was not in a condition to do heavy physical activities, so he wasn't able to perform his daily exercises. For the past month, Samaya and a group of healers used their healing abilities on him. Coupled with his supreme regeneration and the elven medicinal herbs, his energy core gradually improved. A month ago, he could barely absorb mana. Now, he could use mana to speed up his recovery. All the wounds in his body had already scarred. There was still some lingering pain, but they were manageable. Hershey and Elena might pester me if they see these scars. Alaric mumbled bitterly as he looked at his reflection in the mirror. His skin was now covered in new scars of all shapes and sizes. It reflected the intense battle they had been through. Sighing heavily, he changed into a new set of clothes. This time, he wore formal attire since today was a bit special. It was their last day in the Greenwood Kingdom. At this moment, two women suddenly stepped forward. They were Matilda and Celine. Please allow us to help you, Your Highness. Matilda offered while staring at Alaric's face. Alaric looked at them through the mirror and shook his head. It's fine. I can do this on my own. You two can wait for me outside. Matilda looked disappointed, but she didn't insist. Meanwhile, Celine stayed silent the entire time. We obey your words, Your Highness. The two ladies bowed before leaving the room. Alaric sighed as he watched them leave. Lustful cauldron. That's one strange ability. It's getting harder and harder to resist her charm. Alaric shook his head. He spent a quarter of an hour adjusting the creases of his clothes. After making sure that he hadn't forgotten anything, he stepped out of the room. Let's go. He nodded to the two ladies who were waiting for him outside. During the past month, they had been taking care of his daily needs. It wasn't appropriate for Samaya to handle menial tasks, so these two were responsible for helping him. At first, Ivana was highly resistant to seeing them in close contact with him, but she gradually accepted their presence. Upon stepping out of the recovery facility, Aldrin, Samaya, and a group of warriors led by Butch were already there waiting for them next to the carriage. Your carriage is ready, Your Highness. Aldrin approached him while sending Matilda a quick glance. Her face and overflowing charisma were hard to resist, but knowing that she was Alaric's woman, Aldrin forced himself to look away. The escort warriors were the same. They couldn't help but stare at her shapely body. Unlike Aldrin, it took them a great deal of effort to pull their eyes away from Matilda. As for Butch, he showed no signs of interest. He only sent her a couple of curious glances. Samaya faked a cough when she sensed them staring intently at Matilda. Alaric shook his head when he saw this. I might need to find a way to tame her charisma. I can't have my men ogling at her all day. Let's go meet the others. He spoke to Aldrin. Aldrin acknowledged his command with a bow. He then informed the coachman of their destination. Alaric and the three ladies entered the carriage, while Aldrin and the warriors jumped onto their horses. Butch made a hand signal to the escort warriors, signaling them to follow the carriage. Chapter 431. Leaving the Elven Kingdom. The carriage stopped right beneath a hill located several hundred meters from Ivana's treehouse. When they arrived, a large crowd had already gathered. Everyone was exchanging farewells with the elves they had befriended. The barbarians and elves who were like fire and water before were now chatting like longtime friends. The recent war had bridged the differences between these two races. Alaric stepped out of the carriage and warmly greeted the people who were waiting for him. They were military officers from the barbarian tribes and the Elven Kingdom. "Congratulations on your recovery, Your Highness. You look good in that attire, Your Highness." Alaric politely responded to them one by one. A moment later, Aldrin brought him to where Lucas and the higher-ups from both races were. There he saw Ivana standing next to her father, Garandel. Ivana also noticed his arrival. She smiled at him, but when she saw the women behind Alaric, her smile faded. "Ivana," Alaric greeted her. The elven princess responded curtly. She didn't even bother to hide her displeasure, but her mood slowly improved as their conversation deepened. In the past month, Ivana visited him regularly to check his condition. She even used her Nature's Blessing integrated trait to help him absorb the elven medicinal herbs. With their daily interactions, their relationship gradually improved. It still wasn't what it used to be, but Alaric was happy with the progress. While they were conversing, Garandel suddenly jumped on top of the small hill and opened his mouth. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" He imbued mana into his voice so everyone heard his words loud and clear. Hearing the Elven King's words, everyone turned their heads. Garandel swept his gaze at the gathered crowd, looking pleased. "First of all, I would like to thank you all for helping our kingdom overcome this crisis. If not for your help." A long speech began. Everyone listened closely, for this was the Elven King's last message before their departure. "When the time comes that you will need our help, we will be there for you. I wish you all a pleasant journey back home. Our doors are always open for your return. Once again, I thank you all from the bottom of my heart." Garandel bowed deeply at the end of his speech. What followed was another round of farewells. At this moment, "Alaric," a familiar voice suddenly drifted into Alaric's ears. Alaric turned his head and saw Vulcan limping towards him. Seeing this, he immediately rushed to his side. "You shouldn't force yourself, Sir Vulcan. It wouldn't be good for your recovery," he reminded the barbarian warrior. Vulcan snorted at his words. "If you're worried about me, you better visit my tribe when you have time." He then leaned forward and whispered, "I will introduce you to the ladies in our tribe." Hearing this, Alaric nervously glanced at Ivana, who was standing not far from them. "Are you trying to sabotage me, Sir Vulcan?" With a bitter smile, he whispered back to the barbarian warrior. Vulcan snickered in amusement. He then placed his hand on Alaric's shoulder and said, "I heard from your father that you are gathering troops to attack Haroon. Do you need our help?" Alaric shook his head and smiled faintly. "This is our battle, Sir Vulcan. I don't want to involve you guys in this. We will take care of it on our own. However, if things get harder, we might need your help." Vulcan chuckled. "Just send us the word. I will gather the warriors of the barbarian tribes to support you." Alaric beamed at his promise. He had seen the bravery and power of the barbarian warriors. They might not have the same level of equipment as the warriors of Estania, but they possessed the courage to face even the most overwhelming odds. He had nothing but admiration for them. Vulcan only left after inviting him to visit their tribe for the 100th time. Looking at them leave, Alaric smiled and let out a deep sigh. "Goodbye, Sir Vulcan." For a barbarian warrior, he has a mischievous personality. Ivana's voice echoed behind him. Alaric laughed at her words while nodding in agreement. "Indeed." He turned around and looked at her, his face revealing the reluctance to separate. "It might take a long while before we can see each other again." Ivana raised an eyebrow and said, "What do you mean?" "I am coming with you." Alaric widened his eyes upon hearing her words. "Huh! I said I am coming with you," Ivana repeated. He stared deeply at her and realized that she wasn't joking. "Have you gotten your father's approval?" Ivana nodded in response. Alaric frowned. She was the heir of the Greenwood Kingdom, so he found it hard to believe that her father would agree to her request. "Why does it seem like you don't want me to go with you?" Ivana squinted her eyes. Alaric immediately shook his head. Of course not. I'm just surprised that Uncle has permitted you to leave. Ivana snorted. He can't do anything about it. Alaric chuckled dryly at her words. What are you waiting for? Let's go. Ivana grabbed his hand and pulled him towards the carriage. Alaric couldn't even do anything and just let her drag him away. Not far away, Garandel watched this scene with a trace of reluctance. Are you sure about this? Asked Lucas, who was standing next to him. The Elven King forced out a smile. A hatchling will never become a bird if it stays in its nest. I knew this day would come. His words trailed off. Lucas patted his shoulder and reassured him. Don't worry. I will make sure that your daughter is safe. Garendel's expression eased at his words. You have my gratitude, Lucas. I will also send Rosalie to stay with her. I hope you don't mind. Lucas smiled faintly and shook his head. Having Rosalie with us will be more reassuring. The two exchanged words before they bid each other farewell. Soon, the warriors of House Silversword left the Elven Kingdom. Chapter 432. Seekus. The journey to North Pinetown took much longer than expected, as they had brought the corpses of the fallen warriors of House Silversword. From the thousands of soldiers they brought to the enchanted woodlands, more than 100 have been killed. The trip that was supposed to take less than 10 days was extended to more than 2 weeks. When they arrived at the entrance of North Pinetown, a large crowd was waiting for them. At this moment, Alaric was inside the carriage, chatting with Ivana when he heard Lucas's voice. Alaric. Hearing his father's voice, Alaric stuck his head out of the carriage window and looked at Lucas, who was riding a horse close to them. What is it, Dad? Lucas pulled the reins of his horse, urging it to move closer to the carriage. He then leaned over and whispered, Don't mention anything about your injuries to your mothers. I have already warned the others, so just leave the talking to me. So it's about that. Alaric nodded without much thought. I understand. He also didn't want to make his mothers worried, so he agreed to keep it a secret. Good. After getting his response, Lucas kicked his horse's belly and moved ahead of the entourage. A moment later, the carriage also stopped at the entrance. Alaric and Ivana stepped out of the carriage to greet everyone who came to wait for them. Alaric, my son, I heard that you sustained some injuries during the battle. Jade Christine rushed to his side, her face filled with concern. With a nervous smile, Alaric replied, It's nothing serious, my lady, just some minor cuts and bruises. Jade Christine seemed to be relieved to hear his response. That's good. How are your wounds, son? Asked Maria, who was carrying his baby sister. Turning his head, Alaric poked his sister's face and answered, I received plenty of help from the elves. With their medicine and the support of their skilled healers, I recovered in just a couple of days. I see. It sounds reassuring to have them. Maria smiled faintly. That's true. Alaric chuckled. At this moment, Hershey walked towards him. A little girl followed her with quick, nimble steps. Alaric, I'm glad to see you safe. Hershey dove into his embrace. Alaric hugged her tightly and kissed her forehead. I'm sorry for making you worry about me. Uncle. An excited voice interrupted their reunion. Alaric beamed and looked at the little girl who was clinging tightly to his leg. How have you been, Dudu? Alaric greeted his family and everyone else who had come to see them. This was supposed to be a happy reunion, but there were also people who were mourning. They were the family members of the warriors who had died in battle. Alaric let out a long emotional sigh as he watched them. It's not your fault, whispered Hershey as she grabbed his hand. Sensing the warmth from her hands made Alaric smile. I know. Soon the group entered the town. The first thing they did upon their return was to give the fallen warriors a proper burial. They were all buried on top of Mount Tejera. It was already nighttime when they got home from the burial ceremony. You two should get some rest. You haven't rested since you arrived. Hershey spoke to Alaric and Ivana. I will get some fresh air. You two should head back first. Alaric smiled at them. Hershey stared deeply at him and sighed. Is he still affected by the death of those warriors? Thinking about this, she nodded her head. All right, I will bring Ivana to our bedchamber. Don't make us wait for too long. Alaric nodded. All right. Ivana wanted to say something, but before she could say anything, Hershey suddenly pulled her inside the mansion. After they left, Alaric went out of the estate on a horse and headed to the secluded parts of the town. This should be a good place, he mumbled to himself. He then opened the system screen. Do you want to use your Transcendent Night card? Yes. No. Alaric looked around carefully. After making sure that no one was nearby, he clicked yes. A flash of white light blinded him for a moment. When he opened his eyes, he saw a gloomy-faced man dressed in black clothes. He was a bit shorter than him. He was on the slender side, but one could see the toned muscles in his arms. He didn't look old. From his facial features, he looked like someone in his mid-30s. However, his most notable feature was his eyes. They were all white. Is he blind? Alaric raised an eyebrow. Greetings, my lord. The man lowered his head. What's your name? Alaric asked. I don't have a name, my lord, but I was once called 003. The man responded emotionlessly. 003? Alaric frowned. That won't do. I can't have people calling you that. How about I give you a new name? The man showed no change in his expression and simply nodded. This is too sudden. Let me think for a bit. Alaric rubbed his chin and pondered deeply. What could be a fitting name for this guy? After a few minutes of silence, Alaric looked at him and said, Sekus, that will be your new name. Thank you for bestowing me a name, my lord. Sekus did a fist-palm salute. Alaric nodded. He wanted to ask him some questions, but he suddenly heard a series of footsteps. We need to leave. Follow me. Without waiting for Sekus' response, Alaric rushed out of the dark alleyway. He wanted to test if this new guy could match his speed. To his surprise, Sekus was able to follow him. Seeing this, Alaric increased his speed. The man matched his pace without issue. Interesting. Alaric grinned. The two stopped in front of a small inn. Alaric covered his head with a cloth to hide his face. He didn't want to cause a commotion, so he decided to hide his identity. For now, you should stay in this inn. I will come back to get you in a few days. Just lay low and don't alert anyone. Alaric instructed. I obey, my lord. Alaric tried asking him more about his identity, but just like what happened with Galliner and Butch, he only saw Sekus moving his mouth, but Alaric heard nothing. After some time, Alaric gave up. Here is some money. Alaric handed him a small stack of bills. Use that for your daily needs. You can also use the money to buy yourself a new set of clothes. If you can, you should find a way to get yourself an identification. This was another test for him. He wanted to know the extent of this guy's abilities. Will he be able to get himself an identification in a few days? Alaric revealed a look of anticipation when he thought about this. I follow your commands. Sekus remained calm and simply acknowledged his instructions. All right, you may go. If I don't come in a few days, I will send someone to pick you up. Alaric waved his hand. Sekus bowed with a fist-palm salute. I will wait for your summons, my lord. After saying those words, he turned around and headed inside the inn. Alaric watched him leave with a thoughtful look. It seems like I got myself a mysterious fellow. Sekus, Transcendent Knight, EXP, 3700/5000. Potential SS. Traits: Assassination, SS. Dagger Mastery, SS. Poison Mastery, S. Sixth Sense, S. Swordsmanship, S. Hidden Weapons, S. Interrogation, S. Tracking, S. Counter-reconnaissance, A. Infiltration, A, Strength, 466. Stamina, 442. Agility, 489. Vitality, 477. Endurance, 450.
Mana? 428.
Most of his traits are something that only assassins would possess. He must have been a highly trained assassin or death warrior. Alaric didn't linger for long and hurried back to the estate. Meanwhile, a figure stood atop the roof of the inn, watching him disappear into the darkness. How did I come back to life? Sikas thought to himself. As he tried to recall more about himself, he felt a sharp pain that spread across his body. It was so painful that it made a trained assassin like him grimace. There is no use in thinking about the past. I am no longer 003. I am Sikas. Whoosh! His figure suddenly vanished. Alaric stayed in the mansion for the next few days. He still had some lingering issues with his mobility, but he decided to do his daily missions. It's been 4 days since I left Sikas on his own. It's about time to bring him to the estate, Alaric thought. He had already hinted to his father that he had found an interesting person in the town. Lucas also seemed curious when he mentioned this, so he believed that there wouldn't be any issues if he brought Sikas now. After changing into a new set of clothes, Alaric summoned Aldrin and instructed him to bring Sikas to the estate. Chapter 433. Sikas arrives at the estate. What does His Highness want from a blind man? Thought Aldrin, who was riding his horse in the streets of North Pine Town. While trying to guess Alaric's motive, he found himself in front of an inn. This should be the place. He jumped off his horse and entered the establishment. Oh my! What a rare visitor. Please come in, greeted the proprietress, a middle-aged woman in her 40s. Aldrin was dressed in his guard's uniform, which carried the emblem of House Silversword, so the proprietress enthusiastically entertained him. Aldrin was already used to this kind of enthusiasm from the townspeople, so he wasn't flustered. He didn't beat around the bush and directly asked what he came for. Is there a blind man among your guests? Hearing this, the proprietress hesitated for a moment. Aldrin noticed her hesitation, so he immediately explained, You have nothing to worry about. I am just running an errand for His Highness. When he mentioned that it was related to Alaric, the proprietress was taken aback. Oh, you should have told me sooner, she grinned. There is only one blind person in my inn, and it's that man over there. She pointed to the corner of the dining hall where a lone person was eating his meal. Aldrin thanked her and approached the person she had pointed out. Are you Sir Sikas? He asked while looking at the man's side profile. He had short black hair. The right side of his face had a burn scar and his neck had 2 stab scars. Looking down, Aldrin observed the man's arms. It was also covered in scars of different shapes and sizes. His palms have thick calluses too. That is not something that one would have from simply doing hard labor. Is he a swordsman? Aldrin narrowed his eyes. He tried to sense the man's aura, but no matter how hard he tried, he felt no trace of mana from him. Suddenly, Sikas stood up and turned around to face him. You must be the person sent by my lord. He spoke in a voice devoid of emotion. Aldrin finally got a clearer look at the man's eyes. It was all white, but strangely enough, he felt as if his entire being had been scrutinized. Cold sweat trickled down his back. This guy is an expert, one who is much stronger than me. Forcefully calming his nerves, Aldrin nodded. That's right. His Highness sent me to pick you up. I see. Lead the way. Sikas indifferently responded. Follow me. Aldrin gestured for him to follow before he walked out of the inn. When they stepped out of the establishment, Aldrin realized that he hadn't brought an extra horse. I only brought 1 horse with me. If you don't mind, you can sit behind me. Sikas shook his head. That won't be necessary. Just lead the way. I will follow you. Aldrin raised an eyebrow. Although his horse was only a fatal-grade monster, its running speed was faster than most elite knights. Is he a transcendent knight? A thought came to his mind and it made him a bit fearful of Sikas. All right. He didn't force Sikas to sit behind him. He jumped onto his horse and turned his head. Are you ready? Sikas nodded calmly. After getting his response, Aldrin squeezed his legs and urged his horse to move. They were still on the busy road, so he didn't make his horse move faster to avoid accidents. He only urged his horse to go at full speed when they went past the public streets. To his amazement, Sikas was able to match his mount's speed without breaking a sweat. This confirmed his suspicions about Sikas's strength. He is indeed a transcendent knight. But how can he see me when he is blind? Aldrin was becoming more and more curious about this mysterious blind warrior. He wondered who this person was and why Alaric was looking for him. Soon they entered the estate. The guards had already been made aware that he would bring someone with him, so no one stopped them from going in. A moment later, they stopped in front of the main mansion. Aldrin jumped off his horse and beckoned to Sikas. "His Highness is waiting for you in his study. I will take you there." Sikas didn't say anything and just followed him quietly. On their way to Alaric's study, they encountered a few servants who sent them curious looks. The warriors stationed inside the mansion eyed Sikas with a deep frown. "Sir Aldrin, who is this person?" A middle-aged warrior came to stop them. It was Arthur, one of Alaric's most trusted confidants. Aldrin cupped his fists to greet him. "This is Sir Sikas. His Highness sent me to pick him up from the town." Arthur's furrowed eyebrows eased up upon hearing this. "So this is the person that His Highness has mentioned. I apologize for my discourtesy. Please." The middle-aged elite knight made a this-way gesture. "It's all right. You don't need to apologize, Sir Arthur." Aldrin nodded and smiled faintly. He respected this man. Other than his unwavering loyalty, he was also one of the strongest elite knights in the household. His strength was only beneath that of Fredrin's and Henry's. After speaking with Arthur, Aldrin brought Sikas to the upper floors. They passed by a few more guards, but this time, no one came to stop them. A few minutes later, they finally arrived in front of Alaric's study. "His Highness is inside. I can only take you here." Aldrin stared deeply at the blind warrior. Sikas nodded, walked past him, and entered the room. Looking at the closed door, Aldrin smiled bitterly while shaking his head. What a cold fellow. Now that his task was done, he didn't linger and left. Meanwhile, Sikas had already found Alaric. The latter was seated behind his desk, reading a book about the history of Harun. Seeing him, Sikas bowed his head deeply. "Greetings, my lord." Alaric put down the book he was reading and gestured for him to sit on the chair adjacent to his desk. "How was your task?" Chapter 434. Butch vs. Sikas. "I have already completed the task, my lord. I paid a wandering merchant to forge me an identity." Sikas took out a wooden title which had his name written on it. The name of a certain village was also carved on the title. This was a simple identity plate commonly used by the commoners. This was usually handed out by officials, but some legitimate groups or organizations could also make one. Alaric smiled as he inspected the wooden plate. The money he gave to Sikas was only sufficient to buy him clothes and food. There wasn't enough to pay for an identity plate. Alaric purposely did this as a form of test for him, and Sikas didn't disappoint him. As for how he didn't bother to ask. What was important was that he had completed the task. "Well done," he praised. Sikas remained expressionless after hearing his praise. "By now, I'm sure you are already aware of my identity. You should change how you address me so the others won't say anything about you." Alaric reminded him. "I obey, Your Highness." Sikas complied without hesitation. In the past few days that he was in the town, he had indeed inquired about Alaric's identity. He had also familiarized himself with the town. He had even infiltrated the outer parts of the estate and mapped out the layout. As for the inner parts of the estate, he didn't venture too deeply since he sensed that it would endanger his life. "Follow me." Alaric stood up and beckoned to him. "I will introduce you to my family. I believe I don't need to tell you what to say to them. You can rest assured, Your Highness. I know what not to say," Sikas calmly replied. "Good." Alaric was pleased by his response. He then brought him out of the study and went to introduce him to his parents. They were curious about Sikas, especially Lucas. They asked Sikas some questions, mostly about his identity. Unsurprisingly, the man was able to respond without stuttering. Even in front of Lucas, a mythical knight, Sikas managed to keep his cool. After over an hour of questioning, Lucas finally dismissed them. "Not bad. You sure know what you are doing." Alaric chuckled as he tapped Sikas's shoulder. "Cool as always." Sikas simply lowered his head, looking completely unbothered by his praise. Alaric brought him to the training grounds and introduced him to the warriors. Unlike his parents, the warriors didn't dare ask Sikas too many questions, especially after hearing that he was a transcendent knight. To most of them, a transcendent knight was a respectable figure that they couldn't afford to offend. "Your Highness, can I request a spar against Sir Sikas?" A deep voice suddenly drifted into Alaric's ears. His voice wasn't loud, but those nearby heard it clearly. "Sir Butch wants to spar with the new guy. This will be interesting. A spar between two transcendent knights? That's rare." Everyone eagerly waited for Alaric's response. Seeing the anticipation in their eyes, how could Alaric reject the request? With a nod of his head, he agreed. "All right, I allow it." "Thank you, Your Highness." Butch lowered his head. Everyone erupted into cheers. They quickly vacated and gave the two transcendents enough space to show off their prowess. "This is only a spar, so no fatal attacks must be made. You cannot use mana or weapons either. Do you two agree with this?" Alaric laid down the rules. "I have no objections, Your Highness," Butch responded. On the other hand, Sikas simply nodded in response. "All right, you two may begin." Alaric left the stage for them. Butch adjusted his stance while keeping his eyes on Sikas. He hadn't requested this spar out of personal preference. It was something that Alaric had tasked him with. What's special about this man? Butch narrowed his eyes beneath his mask. The two were in a standstill for a few seconds before Sikas's figure suddenly vanished. No one saw him move, and they only realized what happened when he reappeared in front of Butch. So fast! When did he dash? The warriors were startled by his speed, but before they could comprehend the situation, the fight had already begun. Whoosh! Sikas sent a kick that created a violent gust of wind. Butch was also surprised by his speed, but he was quick to react to the attack. He raised his arm to defend himself. Bang! The kick was so strong that the impact caused a loud noise. However, Butch managed to block it without moving from his spot. So strong. Butch thought to himself, shocked by his opponent's raw power. He was most confident in his strength, but against this blind man, he found himself a bit lacking. In the next moment, the two exchanged dozens of moves, causing sharp whistling sounds with each of their strikes. Most of the warriors could barely follow their movements, but the elite knights noticed that Butch was on the losing end. "No way. He is actually stronger than Sir Butch with that slender frame of his," Arthur exclaimed, his face filled with disbelief. Aldrin nodded in agreement. "He is flexible and he attacks even in awkward angles. I don't want to admit it, but he is stronger and more skilled than Sir Butch." "Is he really that good?" A warrior couldn't believe his words. "I don't know if I should say this, but I think he is comparable to Sir Galliner, at least in terms of skill." Rigger, another elite knight, spoke. "No way. How is that possible?" Galliner was a symbol of strength and power. He had already proven himself on the battlefield. To these warriors, his strength was only beneath that of a mythical knight. "He isn't wrong." Alaric, who was silent the entire time, expressed his agreement. "Galliner is stronger, but Sikas is more skilled. If I had allowed them to use weapons, this battle would have already concluded." He added, this time, no one could deny it anymore, for Alaric wasn't someone to speak nonsense. Chapter 435. Telling Ivana about Dudu's identity. While they were conversing, the battle between Butch and Sikas became more intense. Bang! Bang! As more time passed, it became apparent to everyone that Butch was losing. How can a blind man move as if he has eyes on his back? I never thought that I would see Sir Butch lose in a sparring match. The warriors discussed as they watched the battle. Soon, the fight ended with Butch admitting his defeat. It was an amazing fight. Butch cupped his fists with a trace of reluctance in his eyes. He still wanted to continue, but he knew it would be meaningless. Moreover, he couldn't fight his best without his weapon. Sikas returned to the gesture while nodding his head. After the spar, the warriors gradually dispersed to resume their training. Meanwhile, Alaric instructed Aldrin to tour Sekus around the estate. You may leave. Alaric waved his hand and headed back to the main mansion. After taking care of this matter, Alaric went to find Dudu to check her training progress. The girl had been receiving physical training from Ivana, and he was curious to see how the latter would teach the naughty girl. Inside the mansion, there was a special room built for isolated training. This was where Alaric usually does his daily mission, but it was mostly vacant. Since no one else uses the room, Ivana decided to use it as Dudu's training room. He arrived outside the isolated chamber a few minutes later, and he could already hear Ivana's stern voice echoing through the hallway. One more set. Raise your arms properly. Alaric took a peek and saw Dudu performing some kind of exercise under Ivana's strict supervision. The little girl was covered in sweat and she looked at Ivana with her big sparkling eyes. However, her attempt to gain Ivana's mercy didn't seem to have worked. Seeing Dudu like this made Alaric chuckle. He entered the room and walked towards them with a faint smile on his face. Ivana noticed his arrival and quickly turned her head. What are you doing here? The elven princess raised an eyebrow with a displeased look. Uncle! Dudu lowered her arms and was about to rush towards Alaric, but Ivana pulled her clothes to stop the little girl. Did I tell you to stop? Seeing Ivana's stern glare, Dudu could only lower her head in fright, her shoulders drooping. Don't be so harsh on the girl. She is still a child after all. Alaric reminded her in a gentle voice. Ivana glanced at him and retorted. It is important for her to train her body while she is still young. When I was her age, I already knew basic martial arts techniques. Hearing this, Alaric simply smiled. Ivana, I understand that you only want the best for Dudu. However, he paused for a moment and leaned forward to wipe off the sweat on the little girl's face. Dudu doesn't need to learn martial arts, he continued. Ivana frowned when she heard this. Why? Are you saying that our martial arts techniques are weak? She felt insulted. The techniques she learned had been passed down by their ancestors and were improved by the generations that followed. She couldn't accept anyone underestimating their techniques even if it was Alaric. Sensing her anger, Alaric waved his hand. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that your techniques are lacking. I will explain to you later, so you should let Dudu get some rest first. Ivana stared deeply at him. She took a deep breath to calm her agitation before she nodded. Fine. But you better give me a good explanation. Of course. Alaric smiled bitterly. For some reason, her temper had become more fiery after coming to North Pine Town. Ivana snorted at him. She then looked at Dudu and said, You can go for now. Hearing this, the little girl seemed to be invigorated. Her face brightened as she excitedly jumped in joy. Yay! Before leaving the isolated chamber, Dudu beamed at Alaric. Thank you, uncle. The little imp then scurried out as if she were afraid that Ivana would take back her words. Just look how frightened she is. With a wry smile, Alaric shook his head helplessly. To survive in this cruel world, a girl like her needs to learn how to protect herself. Ivana muttered while crossing her arms. Enough about that. Tell me exactly why she doesn't need to learn martial arts. Alaric chuckled nervously upon seeing her cold face. He cleared his throat and replied, Only a few people know about this. Dudu isn't a normal girl. She carries the bloodline of a dragon. His words were like a bomb that exploded in her mind. What? Ivana widened her eyes in disbelief. Are you saying that Dudu is a descendant of a dragon? Alaric nodded his head. That's right. She is still young, so her dragon bloodline has yet to awaken. But when that time comes, she will possess the power of a catastrophe-grade beast. Ivana gasped in shock. She had seen the power of catastrophe-grade beasts, and it was something that she didn't want to witness again. They were walking calamities that brought destruction and chaos to the world. Are you certain of this? She asked, her heart pounding with a hint of fear. Dudu's grandfather told me about it. I also did some observations on her, and I am certain that she does have the blood of a dragon. Ivana took a deep breath. She stayed silent for a moment to process all this information. After calming herself, She looked at Alaric and asked in a cold voice, "What do you intend to do with her? You're not planning on using her as a weapon, right? Do you think I am that kind of person?" Alaric sighed while shaking his head. "You don't have to worry about that. I never planned to bring her on the battlefield. Well, I did plan at first, but not anymore." He didn't say his thoughts out loud since it would only anger Ivana. "Besides, I don't think House Silversword is weak enough that we have to send a little girl into war." Ivana's expression eased up upon hearing this. "Then should I stop her physical training?" she asked.
No.
"You can continue with her training, but you don't need to be strict about it. You might accidentally awaken her dragon bloodline if you push her to her limits." He grinned. Ivana seemed to believe his words by the look on her face. "All right, I will decrease the intensity of her physical training." "That would be nice. Anyway, how was your stay in the town?" The days passed by in the blink of an eye. Unknowingly, another month came. Alaric was mostly free during the past month, so he was able to focus on his recovery and training. With the daily healing from Samaya coupled with his supreme regeneration, Alaric was finally back to full health. Alaric's Silversword, Transcendent Knight EXP 1143 1233/5000 Potential S. Traits: Swordsmanship SSS, Ruthless Slaughterer SS, Supreme Regeneration S, Horseback Riding A, Close Combat A, Sixth Sense B, Appraisals B, Hunting C, Tracking C, Monster Affinity C, Mana Gathering C, Archery D, Strength 343, Stamina 335, Agility 335, Vitality 315, Endurance 315,
Mana, 340.
Battle Points 10,720, 11330, Stat Points 250, 340. Requirements for the next advancement: 5,000 EXP, 500 in all attributes, and 25,000 battle points. It seems like I have accumulated a lot of stat points. I should distribute them now. Alaric thought to himself before distributing his stat points to his attributes. After half an hour of careful consideration, he had allocated all the stat points he had accumulated. Strength 343, 423. Stamina 335, 415. Agility 335, 415. Vitality 315, 365. Endurance 315, 365.
Mana, 340, 370.
Stat points 340. 0. I now have 3 attributes above 400 and the rest are not that far off. He was satisfied with his progress this time. Even without testing it, he could tell that his overall abilities had improved significantly. Can I beat Sekus now? A thought crossed his mind. In the past month, he had been sparring with Butch and Sekus. He could already beat Butch, but there was still a gap between him and Sekus. However, he felt that he might be able to beat Sekus now. Should I test it out? Thinking about this, Alaric stepped out of the isolated chamber and headed straight to the training ground. When he arrived at the training ground, he looked for Sekus, but he was nowhere to be found. Where is that guy? Suddenly, he felt someone staring at him. Furrowing his eyebrows, he turned his head and saw Sekus hidden in the crowd looking at him with a calm gaze. When did he? He beckoned to Sekus. Come here for a moment. Were you looking for me, Your Highness? Sekus asked as he approached him. Why? Don't tell me you intentionally hid yourself. Alaric stared at him suspiciously. Sekus lowered his head. I apologize, Your Highness. I concealed myself out of habit. Chapter 436. The young warriors want to participate in the war. Never mind that. Why don't you spar with me? Alaric came here with so much confidence, but he now felt that there was still some distance between him and Sekus. If he hadn't intentionally revealed himself, I wouldn't have sensed him. He is indeed good at hiding his aura. I obey your commands. Sikas agreed without hesitation.
No hesitaschen.
Alaric raised an eyebrow. He then instructed the crowd to vacate some space for them. When the warriors heard he would spar with Sikas, everyone eagerly cleared enough space for them. His Highness is sparring with Sir Sikas again. How long do you think His Highness will last this time? The last time they sparred, Sir Sikas defeated His Highness in just a few minutes. Maybe today's spar will be a bit longer. The crowd discussed as Alaric and Sikas headed to the center. Let's begin when you are ready. Alaric unsheathed his sword. During his last spars with Sikas and Butch, he had never used his short sword. He didn't want to rely on it too much. Sikas grabbed a pair of daggers and nodded his head. I'm ready, Your Highness. Alaric was about to make his move, but then an urgent voice echoed through the training ground. Your Highness, there is a letter from the capital. It's from His Highness Giovanni. A warrior on horseback shouted as he approached. Hearing this, Alaric lowered his sword, his eyebrows deeply furrowed. The messenger noticed that he seemed to have disturbed an important moment, so he jumped off his horse and bowed in apology. I'm sorry for disturbing Your Highness. I will come back later to deliver the letter. Alaric waved his hand while sheathing his sword. There is no need for that. Bring the letter here. Yes, Your Highness. The messenger rushed to his side and handed him the letter. Alaric saw Giovanni's seal on the letter. After making sure that it hadn't been tampered with, he dismissed the messenger. Good job. You may go. Yes, Your Highness. The messenger bowed deeply before he left. Alaric didn't open the letter since there were many people around. He looked at Sikas and said, We will continue the spar at a later time. Follow me to my study. We might have work to do soon. Sikas nodded to acknowledge his command. With this sudden turn of events, the crowd reluctantly dispersed. It seems like we are heading to battle soon. Aaliyah, who was among the crowd, mumbled with a cold look. You think so? Do you think His Highness will bring us to the battlefield? Renanti asked with his arms crossed. Who knows? But I sure hope His Highness will. I want to test out my progress in a large-scale battle. Rasmus responded. What do you think, Wolf? Everyone turned their gaze towards the youngest member in the group. A few months ago, he looked like a scrawny teenager. But Wolf's physical appearance had completely changed. He was now almost as tall as Rasmus. He had even developed some muscles. Although his face still carried some semblance of youth, he also gained some maturity. I think we are all ready for this. I will try to convince Sir Rigger to let us participate in the coming war. If that doesn't work, I will speak with His Highness. Wolf replied with a determined expression. Everyone in the group smiled upon hearing his words. Even Aaliyah, who usually wore a stern face, couldn't help but smile. Then we will help you convince Sir Rigger. Rasmus placed his hand on Wolf's shoulder, beaming. What are we waiting for? Let's do this. After making their decision, the group went to look for Rigger. Rigger was their main instructor, and his words carried some weight in the household's military matters. He might not be a transcendent knight, but he has been with the household for a long time, so everyone trusted him. Half an hour later, they found Rigger entering the beast garden. It's Sir Rigger. Quick, let's go. They rushed to the beast garden, but Rigger was faster than them. When they entered, he was already nowhere to be found. Where did he go? Is he purposely avoiding us? That can't be. We should look for Sir Cassius. Sir Rigger will definitely look for him, since this place is within his jurisdiction. Renanti suggested. Then we must hurry. The group didn't waste any time and headed straight to Cassius' little hut, which was located right in the middle of the beast garden. The place was inhabited by numerous monsters, so they had to navigate the area carefully. Luckily for them, the monsters here were mostly tamed beasts, so they didn't encounter any major problem along the way. Soon, they saw a small thatched hut surrounded by short wooden fences. There were a few powerful disaster-grade beasts guarding the hut, so the group was forced to take a halt so as not to alert them. The monsters eyed them warily, but they didn't attack the group. Calm down, everyone. Those monsters are Sir Cassius's tamed beasts. We can't be reckless here. Renanti reminded the group. Hearing his words, everyone nodded, while keeping a close watch on the beasts. These monsters are so powerful. How did Sir Cassius make them so obedient? Rasmus asked while rubbing his chin. I heard that he has a gift for making friends with fierce monsters. Someone told me that Sir Cassius can also communicate with these creatures. Renanti replied. Wow, really? That's an awesome ability. Wolf exclaimed with a fascinated look. What are you guys doing there? Stop dragging your feet and come quickly. Aaliyah's stern voice drifted into their ears. Hearing this, they no longer dawdled and rushed towards the hut. At this moment, they saw an old man with a straw hat coming out of the thatched hut. He had a gentle smile on his face, looking completely like a harmless old man. However, they didn't dare underestimate him, for this old man was someone who had recently become a transcendent knight. Chapter 437. Cassius's Advice. Greetings, Sir Cassius. The old man smiled amicably at them. What's the occasion today? How come I have so many visitors? He jokingly said. At this moment, another person stepped out of the hut. It was Rigger, the very person they were looking for. What are you kids doing here? Rigger raised his eyebrows upon seeing them. The young warriors glanced at each other. Their gazes soon rested on Wolf. Sensing their gazes, Wolf cleared his throat and took a step forward. Sir Rigger, we have something to tell you. Oh, it seems like the kids have something important to discuss with you. Cassius chuckled while stroking his beard. Rigger laughed awkwardly. I'm sorry for disturbing you, Sir Cassius. I didn't know that these kids would come here to find me. Cassius waved his hand. It's all right. It's rare for my small hut to have this many guests. Why don't we all come in to discuss this? I can't let you stand outside in the middle of this heat. That would be great. Thank you for your understanding, sir. Rigger nodded gratefully. He then sent the young warriors a resentful glare and reminded them. What are you guys waiting for? Hurry up and thank Sir Cassius. Hearing his words, Renanti and the others immediately thanked the old man. Thank you, Sir Cassius. No problem. Cassius beckoned to them and gestured for them to enter the hut. Come inside. I will prepare a cold drink for you guys. Good thing I asked the servants to bring me a block of ice yesterday. Everyone entered the thatched hut. Although this humble house looked small from the outside, it was surprisingly spacious inside. There were all sorts of simple furniture and even some decorations. The temperature was also cool inside, which was a huge contrast to the searing temperature outside. You may sit. Just talk comfortably while I bring your drinks. Cassius seemed to be happy to have so many visitors. Let me help you, sir. Wolf volunteered to help, but the old man rejected him. It's fine. I haven't had so many visitors for a while. Cassius didn't wait for his response and eagerly walked away. Wolf stared at the old man and mumbled with a sigh. It seems like Sir Cassius has been lonely here. Suddenly, he felt a hand pressing on his shoulder. He turned his head and saw that it was Rigger. You don't have to worry about him. His Highness visits him regularly. Sir Cassius isn't as lonely as you think. The old man is just excited to have so many visitors at once. Rigger chuckled. Is that so? Wolf was relieved to hear his words. I heard that Sir Cassius had lost his arm during a battle a long time ago, Rasmus said upon taking his seat. That's true. He also accumulated many injuries during that battle, but he had mostly recovered after being healed by Miss Samaya. When he regrew his amputated arm, he trained once more and later advanced to become a transcendent knight. Rigger replied, Miss Samaya is really amazing. If only I had a soul mark too. Unfortunately, I am not fated to become a beast soul warrior. Wolf slumped on the chair next to Rasmus. You want to become a beast soul warrior? Aaliyah stared at him in surprise. The others were also shocked. They didn't expect to hear this from Wolf. He was the most talented warrior in their batch, so they thought that he was already satisfied with himself. It turned out that he also had this kind of longing in him. Who doesn't want to? Wolf responded with a self-deprecating smile. I wonder if there is a way for us to gain a soul mark? He shook his head with a regretful expression. That's impossible. There has never been a warrior who has gained a soul mark throughout history. Rasmus scoffed. While they were talking about this, Cassius returned with a pitcher of cold juice and wooden cups enough for the whole group. You guys should drink something cold. This will help you adjust your body temperature in this kind of hot weather, the old man said as he put the pitcher on a small round table. Thank you, sir. That looks good. I would love to try it. After filling their cups with the cold juice, Rigger leaned on his chair and asked, So why are you guys looking for me? Is there something you need? Wolf put down his cup and replied, It's like this. We want to participate in the coming war. Hearing this, Rigger almost spat the juice he was drinking. What? Cassius was also shocked to hear this. He never thought that these young warriors would actually volunteer to join the war. Looking at their faces, it seemed like they were serious. Taking a deep breath, Rigger frowned while shaking his head. I commend your courage, but I have no say in this matter. Sir, can you at least help us persuade His Highness? Wolf said with a pleading look. Rigger rubbed the bridge of his nose and replied in a serious voice. Look here, kids. I know that you are eager to prove yourselves, but the battlefield is far more dangerous than you think. Do you know how many warriors died in the recent war against the monster colony? Almost 100,000 warriors. Some of them are even transcendent knights. Do you understand what I mean? Everyone's expression hardened upon hearing this. While they were ruminating on his words, Cassius suddenly spoke. I don't want to interfere with your decisions, but Rigger is right. The battles you had gone through are just minor skirmishes between factions. His Highness is planning to lead a battle against Haroon. The scale of this war is unimaginable. You guys are still young, so you should value your life. If you really want to join His Highness in battle, then train harder. You can join him once you have become more powerful. With your current strength, a small mistake on the battlefield will end your lives. Do you still wish to participate? Chapter 438. Cassius's profound knowledge. The old man's words were like a sledgehammer pounding into them and shaking their very core. However, their hesitation only appeared in an instant before it vanished without a trace. We understand that this is a dangerous endeavor, but we have already made up our minds, spoke Aaliyah, who was silent the entire time. Hearing her words, the young warriors smiled, nodding their heads. Looking at their faces, Cassius felt a sense of déjà vu. I was just like them when I was young, full of confidence and enthusiasm. I just hope that they won't meet the same tragedy that I experienced. With a soft sigh, Cassius shook his head. Since you young ones have already made a decision, then I won't dissuade you anymore. He then tapped Rigger's shoulder and said, You can speak with them. I will go tend to the beasts. Rigger nodded promptly. Yes, sir. The old man didn't linger. He put on his straw hat and left. An awkward silence hung in the air for a brief moment. Rigger faked a cough to break the silence. Ahem. I will not promise you anything, but I will inform His Highness about your request. The faces of the young warriors brightened upon hearing this. Thank you, Sir Rigger. Thank you, sir. We will never forget this. Hearing their excited voices, Rigger raised his hand while shaking his head. Don't be happy so soon. The final decision is still in the hands of His Highness. Then can I go with you, sir? I would like to speak with His Highness, Rasmus suddenly said. Rigger raised an eyebrow and stared deeply at him. This kid was one of the best young warriors he had taught. Rasmus had also left a deep impression on him since Alaric had told him to keep an eye on the young man. Back then, he thought that Alaric only wanted to give Rasmus the chance to achieve his dreams of becoming a knight. However, after months of training, Rasmus had exceeded his expectations. He had become one of the leading figures of the young warriors in the household. After some thought, Rigger nodded his head. Fine. Rasmus clenched his fists underneath the table. My chance has finally come. I have been waiting for this moment since I followed His Highness. He had chosen to follow Alaric to fulfill his dream of becoming a respectable warrior like his adoptive grandfather, William. He didn't have any big ambitions at that time, but after witnessing Alaric's kindness to him and his siblings in the orphanage, he decided to wholeheartedly serve Alaric. They stayed for another half an hour to chat about random matters. "Let's go say goodbye to Sir Cassius before leaving," said Rigger as he stood up from his seat. Everyone nodded at his words. Rigger brought them out of the thatched hut and searched for Cassius within the beast garden. They later found the old man feeding a large herd of foals. Cassius turned his head when he sensed them approaching. "Don't scare the foals," he reminded them. The group immediately retracted their manna when they heard his reminder. These foals are born from the union of ice horses and common war horses. They are still young, but when they reach adulthood, there might be one of them that will become a catastrophe-grade war horse. Cassius spoke with so much pride. Everyone could see the old man's dedication to his task. "They are that awesome?" Wolf exclaimed in shock. "Awesome? Of course they are." Cassius laughed heartily. Like a curious kid, Wolf rushed to the old man's side and asked, "When will they reach adulthood, sir? I would like one for myself." Cassius chuckled and shook his head. "Do you think it's easy to raise these creatures? A normal war horse will need over 5 years to reach adulthood, and a special breed will need close to 10 years. As for these horses, it will take them 10 to 12 years to fully mature." Wolf looked downcast upon hearing this. "Is there no way to speed up their development?" Renanti joined the conversation as he looked curiously at the foals. The young warriors were also interested. As warriors, which of them hadn't dreamed of riding a catastrophe-grade mount? Cassius stroked his beard with a mysterious smile. He took something out of his pocket and showed it to them. It looked like a small piece of ginger which emitted a strange smell similar to that of cooked meat. "This is a rare magical plant called Star Mandragora. It's relatively useless for knights and beast soul warriors, but to monsters, it's like a tonic or an elixir. This piece alone can accelerate the growth of any monster by a few months," Cassius explained, showing his profound knowledge in raising monsters. "So there is actually something that amazing." With a faint smile on his face, Cassius added, "It's amazing. That is true, but this plant is hard to find. I tried growing them on my own, but the results weren't great. If I had enough supply of this plant, I could grow these foals into their full potential in just a few years." "Whoa! That's amazing, Sir Cassius." Looking at the old man happily sharing his knowledge the young warriors, Rigger let out a smile. "This is truly where you belong, Sir Cassius. I'm happy to see you in such good spirits." After returning from the war years ago, Cassius had always been gloomy. He looked like he had aged a few decades at that time, but it seemed like his mental state had improved recently. "You have finally overcome your trauma, sir." Rigger didn't disturb them and just quietly waited at the corner. After some time, Cassius turned his head to look at him. "Are you guys going to see His Highness?" Rigger nodded. "Yes, sir." "I see. You guys may leave. You can visit me here anytime you want." Cassius waved his hand. Rigger bowed to the old man and gestured at the young warriors to do the same. "Thank you for your hospitality, sir. We will visit you again soon." Chapter 439. Lucas's Decision. Meanwhile, Alaric was in his study, reading the letter sent by Giovanni. Mentioned in the letter was Giovanni's displeasure that Alaric couldn't come to his wedding. Truthfully, Alaric wanted to attend his cousin's wedding, but it just so happened that there was a situation in the Enchanted Woodlands. Alaric smiled in amusement upon reading Giovanni's rants. A moment later, his face suddenly turned serious. "So he has finally gathered troops from the central region's aristocrats and martial houses. You have done well, Giovanni." Alaric put down the letter and kept it inside his inner pocket. He stood up and looked at the warrior who was silently standing by his side. "Sicus, we are heading to the Lord's office. He needs to see this letter." "As you wish, Your Highness," Sicus responded with a nod of his head. Alaric didn't waste any time and stepped out of his study. Sicus followed him quietly. The two walked along the hallway and headed straight to Lucas's office. Alaric was in a hurry, so they arrived in just a few minutes. Upon arriving, Alaric knocked on the door and announced his arrival. "It's me, my lord. Come in. It's unlocked." Lucas's voice echoed from inside the room. Hearing this, Alaric pushed the door open and stepped inside the room together with Secus. Inside, they saw Lucas sitting behind his desk. Bastian, his trusty butler, was not far from him, preparing a pot of tea. Alaric bowed to his father and nodded to the butler. Lucas nodded at him to acknowledge his greeting. He then beckoned to his son and gestured for him to take his seat. "Is there something on your mind?" he asked while adjusting his sitting posture. Alaric took his seat and nodded. "Yes, my lord." He took out the letter he had received and handed it to his father. "Giovanni sent this letter. I have already read the contents." Seeing his serious expression, Lucas furrowed his eyebrows and took the letter. While he was reading the letter, Bastian approached and quietly served tea for Alaric. "Thank you, Sir Bastian." Alaric smiled faintly. The butler simply bowed his head and took a step back after pouring tea for him. A while later, Lucas put down the letter and rubbed his temples. "Is your decision final?" he asked. Alaric knew what he was talking about and nodded, a trace of anger flashing in his eyes. "Yes, my lord. I cannot forgive those bastards for attacking our lands. Besides, I will never forgive their damned crown prince for coveting my mother." Lucas took a deep breath. He knew that this day would come. Alaric had already discussed this with him when he arrived from the western region. Lucas was also furious that someone wanted to take his wife. He wanted to join his son in battle, but due to his special identity, he couldn't carelessly leave the empire. After mulling over it, he spoke. "I will speak with His Majesty and convince him to send me to Harun. You must not act carelessly while I'm not there." His words were an admittance that the emperor was still in good health, but Alaric smartly avoided the topic. Lucas didn't want to admit it, but Harun was a lot stronger than Astania. They had countless transcendent knights and even several mythical knights and beast soul grandmasters. There were even rumors that they had secretly allied with Veronica. If that were true, the next battle might spark the biggest war in the history of the empire. "My lord!" Alaric wanted to dissuade him, but Lucas raised his hand and said, "You don't need to dissuade me. I have already made this decision some time ago. Your mothers also agreed with my decision." Hearing this, Alaric sighed and leaned on his chair. "Do you think His Majesty will accept your request?" he carefully asked. Lucas didn't answer right away. He grabbed his cup and took a small sip of tea to calm his nerves. "I don't know, but even if His Majesty rejects my request, I will still go," he snorted domineeringly. Alaric couldn't help but smile at his words. Suddenly, a series of knocks on the door interrupted their conversation. Knock, knock, knock. Lucas kept the letter in his pocket before he sent Bastian a knowing look. The butler understood his intentions and immediately went to open the door. As soon as the door was opened, two people entered the room. They were Rigger and Rasmus. The two bowed deeply upon seeing them. "Greetings, my lord." "Greetings, your highness." Alaric nodded, wondering what they had come here for. Meanwhile, Lucas beckoned to the two with his hand. "Come here and take your seats." Rigger nodded his head and walked towards the vacant chairs. Rasmus nervously followed him. "So, why did you two come to my study?" Lucas stared deeply at Rigger. Rigger cleared his throat and replied awkwardly. Actually, we came here to see His Highness." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Is it so urgent that you have to interrupt my conversation with my son?" "I apologize, my lord Dash." Rigger couldn't finish his words as Rasmus suddenly spoke. "It's my fault, my lord." The young warrior looked nervous, but he didn't want his instructor to take the blame for them. Everyone turned their gaze to him. Sensing that they were looking at him, Rasmus took a deep breath to gather his thoughts. After calming himself, he opened his mouth. "We want to participate in the war." Everyone was stunned. "What did you say?" Alaric frowned. He knew that the next war would be more bloody and brutal. He had never planned on bringing the young warriors with him. Rasmus could tell that Alaric was furious, but they had already made up their minds. Your Highness, we understand that you don't want to put us in danger. We are grateful for your kindness. However, we will never truly grow if we always choose to stay in a peaceful environment. We want to grow stronger and have enough power to stand by your side. Rasmus stood up and bowed deeply. Please grant us this opportunity. Chapter 440. Giving the purple mist fruits to the talented young warriors. Looking at Rasmus's youthful face, Alaric recalled the powerful warrior he was in his past life. At that time, Rasmus didn't have any support, but he still made a name for himself on the battlefield. He advanced by leaps and bounds through sheer effort and talent. He is right. This war might give him the chance to become a full-fledged knight. Not just him, all the young warriors in his batch are talented individuals. Given their potential, I'm pretty sure that some of them will become knights if they survive the war. Thinking about this, Alaric let out a heavy sigh. All right, all you young warriors will follow Sir Rigger as part of our infantry. If you are not satisfied with this arrangement, then prove yourselves in battle. Rasmus's eyes brightened. He bowed his head and exclaimed, We will not disappoint you, Your Highness. We will show you the results of our training. Alaric smiled faintly. I shall await to see that day. Thank you, Your Highness. Rasmus couldn't wait to deliver the good news to his friends. You can rest assured, Your Highness. I will keep an eye on them. Rigger was also happy. Rasmus and the other young warriors were his students. He considered it an honor to fight with them on the battlefield. With Sir Rigger guiding them, I feel more at ease. Alaric chuckled. He then waved his hand and signaled at them to leave. You two may leave. I still have important matters to discuss with his lordship. Hearing this, Rigger and Rasmus nodded. We will not disturb you any further. A moment later, the two eagerly left the room. It looks like your subordinates have grown into reliable warriors. Lucas's voice drifted into his ears. Indeed, in just a year they showed remarkable progress in their training. Some of them are even close to becoming knights. Alaric was proud of their growth. Lucas rubbed his chin thoughtfully and suggested with a smile, Why don't we give them the first batch of purple mist fruits? Alaric was taken aback. During their march towards the goblin colony more than 2 months ago, they encountered a purple mist tree, a spiritual tree which produces a rare fruit called purple mist fruit. The said tree had been transplanted successfully in their back garden with the help of Ivana's nature's blessing integrated monster trait. The fruit of the spiritual tree was not that helpful to high-level warriors, but when eaten by a knight apprentice, they would immediately advance to the knight realm. What are you hesitating for? I thought you got that tree for those young ones. Lucas chuckled. Alaric smiled awkwardly. He had indeed thought of rewarding the most excellent young warriors with those fruits, but he hadn't had the chance to mention it to his father. Now that Lucas had taken the initiative to bring up the topic, he no longer hesitated. In that case, I will have the fruits ready for them. Alaric cupped his fists. Lucas waved his hand. You go and handle this. I need to prepare for my trip to the capital. Alaric took this as his cue to leave. He stood up from his seat and lowered his head. Thank you, my lord. After bidding his father farewell, Alaric turned around and left with Sikas. Meanwhile, Rasmus went to find his friends to deliver the good news. Seeing him run with such excitement made Rigger sigh while shaking his head. Silly kid, I hope you guys will not regret this choice. Soon, they arrived at the training ground where Renanti and the others were waiting. When they saw Rasmus and Rigger approaching them, they quickly stopped what they were doing. It's them. They are back, one of them exclaimed. Rasmus waved his hand excitedly and rushed to their side. Good news, everyone. Seeing his joyful expression, everyone revealed a look of anticipation. How was it? Did His Highness agree? Renanti asked. The others stared anxiously at Rasmus and waited for him to speak. With a smile on his face, Rasmus nodded. That's right. His Highness gave his approval. We will join the battle as part of Sir Rigger's infantry unit. Hearing this, everyone cheered. Great. Good job, Rasmus. I was right about you. I knew you could convince His Highness. Ha ha ha. Not bad, Rasmus. The cold-faced Aaliyah also curled her lips upward. Suddenly, an indifferent voice interrupted their celebration. You guys. His Highness is looking for you. The young warriors turned their heads and saw a stone-faced Sikas standing behind them. When did he? Rigger, who was standing nearby, was stunned. He didn't even feel Sikas's presence. It was as if he had appeared out of nowhere. The young warriors were nervous in front of Sikas. Even Aaliyah, who was the bravest of the group, was fearful of this man. Sir Sikas. They greeted him respectfully. Sikas's eyes remained serenely calm as he spoke. Follow me. The young warriors glanced at each other. Seeing this, Rigger immediately kicked their asses and gave them an earful. What are you guys standing there for? Go and follow Sir Sikas. Hearing this, Rasmus and the others quickly followed Sikas. I hope those kids won't say anything that would displease that man, Rigger mumbled to himself as he watched them leave. Why do you think His Highness is looking for us? Rasmus asked in a whispering voice. Do we look like we know something? Wolf glanced at him as if he were looking at a fool. Rasmus glared at him and sneakily elbowed his back. Wolf was about to take revenge when Renanti stood between them. Stop arguing, you two. You are only embarrassing yourself in front of Sir Sikas. Renanti chided them with an exasperated expression. On the other hand, Aaliyah snorted as she muttered with disapproval. How childish. Sikas secretly observed them through his peripheral vision. He could feel himself envying their friendship. I wish I also had the same luck as these children. Unfortunately, I didn't get to meet him so soon. Soon they arrived in front of Alaric's study. His Highness is waiting inside, Sikas reminded them as he opened the door. Upon entering, they saw Alaric sitting behind his desk. There were two beautiful ladies standing by his side. The one with monolid eyes was massaging his back, while the valiant-looking lady was serving him tea. Greetings, Your Highness. Rasmus and the others bowed at him. Alaric smiled and nodded in response. I have something important to discuss with you. Come and take your seats. While saying this, he sent a signal to Celine. Author's note: in case you have forgotten, Celine is the big-breasted slave he got from Giovanni. She is also a former knight of Haroun. Celine understood his intentions. She put down the pot of tea and walked towards a nearby drawer to get a wooden box. The young warriors curiously watched the box she was holding, wondering what was inside it. Ignoring their curious glances, Celine placed the wooden box on the floor in front of them. Earlier, Rasmus came to me and informed me about your desire to join the war. Alaric's voice echoed inside the room. I have thought it through and decided to give you guys the chance to participate. However, the battlefield is a very dangerous place. You will face numerous challenges and even witness the death of your comrades. When he mentioned this, the faces of the young warriors turned serious. You are the most talented young warriors in the household, and I would be disheartened to see you fall in battle. Inside that box is something that will help you increase your survivability. Open it up. Alaric sent Rasmus a look. Sensing his gaze, Rasmus didn't dawdle and stood up to lift the lid. As soon as he opened the box, they saw 10 purple fruits lying inside, emitting a strong, tempting scent. Your Highness, these fruits. Looking at their baffled faces, Alaric smiled faintly. It seems like you don't know anything about those fruits. In that case, allow me to explain. He told them everything he knew about the purple mist fruit. Upon hearing his explanation, they immediately understood what was going on. Your Highness, we can't possibly accept something so precious. We haven't done anything worthy of receiving this kind of reward. Aaliyah, the proudest of the bunch, was the first to express her opinion. She is right, Your Highness. I don't think we deserve to eat these fruits. Your Highness. The others also voiced their rejection. Instead of being angry, Alaric merely chuckled while shaking his head. I understand your feelings, but this is something that you must accept. Just think of it as me investing in you guys. But,
No buts.
this is an order, Alaric sternly insisted. Seeing that there was no way for them to refuse, they could only helplessly accept his gift. There are 10 fruits inside that box. You can give the remaining fruits to those who deserve them. I trust that you guys will give it to the most deserving people. There was one more fruit, but it was a bit special, so he decided to hold on to it for the meantime.